Good evening. I would like to call the meeting of the Planning Advisory Committee to order this Monday, May the 5th. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We also acknowledge that people of African descent have been in Nova Scotia for over 400 years. We honor and offer gratitude to those ancestors of Mi'kmaq and African descent who came before us to this land. We have a lengthy agenda this evening. And I will start with approval of the minutes from our last meeting, which was on March 31st, 2025. So if there are any amendments or corrections to be made to the minutes, please let us know. And otherwise, if not, and someone wishes to make a motion to approve them, that would be great. And seconded? Okay. Well, if there's nothing further, I'll call for the approval of the minutes as circulated. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed, signify by saying nay. Nope. Thank you. Motion carried. Okay. We're going to have one change to the agenda. And sorry, I skipped over the approval of that, so I'm going to actually make that change and then ask for that approval. And that will be that we will start with number 5, 201 callback. And then we'll move agenda item number 4 to a time where Senior Planner Fox's computer is cooperating with him. So if I could have a motion to approve the agenda with that one change. Thank you. Okay, thank you. I got Councillor McGrath and seconded by Ms. Delorier. All those in favor of the agenda as circulated with that one change, please signify by saying aye. Great. Any contrary minded? Nope. Motion carried. Okay. So Jacob, if you would like to start, we will go on 201 callback. This application is at step 3 of the process, of the standard process, which you can see. And I know that our architect is here, so if you at any point wish to come down to the microphone, that would be great. All right, you go ahead. Planner McPherson, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good evening to everyone in attendance today. So yes, as you mentioned, this is for 201 Callback Street. It is step 3 of the development agreement application. We can't hear you. Oh, you can't hear me? Maybe let me try moving my mic a little bit closer. How's that? Nice.
That's
some
great.
of them are too sensitive and some of them not so much. Yes, so this application was made by RM Architects, Inc. It was made on February 19th, and it is to permit a 5-story multi-unit residential building comprised of 64 units. As you mentioned, we're on stage 3, which is for main community engagement. This is where all of the major policy review occurs. So it's a bit of a lengthy step. It originally went to step 1, and that was back on February 21st, where the committee provided comments on the proposed design. And after this meeting occurred, there were some edits that were made, some additional details provided by the applicant. And that was also when the public sign was posted on the property. Moving on to step 2, there were some more modifications to the site plan. This included a landscaping plan along with a stormwater management plan. There were also changes that were addressed based on comments that were made both by staff and by the committee. And then this included things such as the layout of the parking and the allocation of parking spaces, the bicycle parking, the driveway going into the proposed underground parking, as well as the inclusion of 3-bedroom units. There was some emphasis during the meeting, during step 2, emphasizing the importance of having the preserved trees, which buffer the property from neighbors across the street. But otherwise, there were no concerns that were raised or additional plans or studies requested by the committee at that meeting. This was also when the mail-out and the online survey were posted. So that brings us to step 3, so that's today. So there were some more updated designs that were submitted by the applicant, including renderings as well as floor plans, as well as some adjustments to the design. Small site details, including a transistor pad. So we're going to move on to our subject land. So here we are at 201 Callback Street. So just to the north of the property, you can see the hub apartments. So there's 3 larger apartment buildings there, and then the surrounding land is largely residential. The property itself is approximately just over 3,000 square meters and has 38.5 meters of frontage on Callback Street. This is an excerpt from the policy area map, and it shows that it is in the urban growth policy area. And then similarly, we have the zoning map showing that the property is entirely within the urban growth zone. And you can see just across the street, there's some general residential. This is a picture of the subject lands. I don't miss this weather, but you can see the hub apartments here in the background, and then the existing tree line that exists right along the property. And another picture showing there is an existing structure on the property, as well as a little separated structure here. You know, it's an old cottage that would exist in the property. It wouldn't be part of the development proposal. It would be torn down or moved. And this is a site plan of the proposal. So this is the most up-to-date site plan that we have. The only change from the last meeting is, I don't know if I can identify it here, but there's a little transistor pad here. It wasn't previously on the site plan, but it's placed inside of the proposed tree retention area. And there'll be more on that later. Supporting that, there is a landscape plan. There haven't been any adjustments to the landscape plan, so this is just a refresher. So you can see more clearly here the tree retention area, as well as the sedum mat that runs along here, and trees in the north and south of the property there. This is the rendering, so it's the newest rendering that has been provided. It's looking from the northwest. You can get a better sense compared to the last meeting of some of the materials that would be used. They would be all non-combustible materials. And here's a view looking from above, sort of in an isometric perspective. So you can see the way down into the underground parking here, as well as the bicycle storage right there by the front. And just one more view showing the height to give you a sense of the scale of the building. You can see a person down here for reference. An updated ground floor plan. So again, really not too many changes. It just provides a little bit more detail. It shows some of the details of the floor plan and what would actually be inside of these rooms. And the parking itself is also completely unchanged. And that brings us to our enabling policy. So this is the policy that allows council to consider this application by development agreement. So it is the enabling policy for this structure. And so, you know, as part of the review process of this stage, the opportunity to go through the policies of our community plan and review them against the proposal based on all of those policies. There were really 2 potential issues that were identified with the structure, and this includes the mixture of uses in that area, as well as the ratio of parking spaces to dwelling units, and we're going to dive into that in a little bit more detail right now. So the first one is the mixture of uses. So if you're familiar with the area, it's largely residential. There is some home-based business, but not a lot of commercial spaces nearby. It would take a decent amount of walking to get to a variety of services, such as a grocery store and these sort of things. You know, the application, since it is just one residential structure, is entirely residential. And while not everything could easily be accessed on foot, there is an ample amount of bicycle parking provided. So that does enable folks that feel interested in doing so to extend their ability to reach things that might be a little bit too far to walk, but totally doable on a bicycle. Now, speaking to, I've mixed myself up here. This is the one I'm parking. So the total requirement for parking is to have 90 spaces. The proposed development has 70 spaces, so that's a ratio of 1.09 spaces per unit. You know, it isn't out of the question for development agreements to have a lower parking requirement compared to the normal requirements of the land use bylaw. And sort of speaking to what I was talking about the bicycle parking, because it provides more bicycle parking, you know, there is the opportunity for folks to not always rely on the use of a private automobile, or perhaps a family only is going to have one car as opposed to two. You know, that's a possibility. It's also quite close to the Nova Scotia Community College, so it's possible that students who may not have a car are looking to bike out to that space. So just jumping back to the idea of the mixture of uses, while this area is largely residential and perhaps it could benefit from some more commercial spaces, the configuration of the lot being quite deep, there's no sidewalk available on this side of the street. It is pretty well set up for a residential development of this kind, so it does sort of fit the constraints of the lot provided. So that was my last point on the mixture of uses. Moving ahead, we have the servicing and the infrastructure. So there is no servicing plan provided as part of this proposal, and the engineering office isn't requesting a servicing plan for any sort of approval. There's also no planned upgrade to municipal infrastructure. In terms of traffic impact, the engineering office also did not ask for a traffic impact study, and so, you know, none is requested, none is given. Stormwater management, one was provided, as I mentioned, and it was reviewed by the town's engineering office. They seemed positive about it. No issues identified with it. It does actually reduce the post-development flow below the pre-development flow, and that is sort of above and beyond what the town normally requires for a stormwater management plan. It's hard to see all the details, but this is just to show you this is what their stormwater management plan looks like. It's also included in the report. The height of the building. So the height of the building is above what is normally required within that zone if this was just being put through as of right, by a margin of 3.5 meters, so that's 11.4 feet. There are some things done to mitigate the height of the building given the constraints of the lot. First and foremost, there's the buffer of trees, so that helps to provide some separation between the building and the neighbors on the other side. They're in the general residential zone, which sort of prompts the need to have this height restriction to begin with. They're sort of buffered away, whereas the neighboring apartment buildings, which are the hub apartments, they sort of fit in with the existing style of this sort of larger apartment building. And then beyond that, the existence of the trees sort of locates the building further back on the site, so away from existing residential development. So those are two ways that it mitigates the question of height. It also aligns with many of the town's planning policies, so it does complement the existing streetscape in the sense that there is already residential construction much like this that already exists right along that street. It builds upon existing infrastructure, so it doesn't require the creation of a lot of new municipal infrastructure in order to have it be created, so it is more financially efficient. And it also preserves and takes care of existing trees, which is one of the town's policies to encourage that. This was sent to a variety of different folks for their interpretation and for their comment. CCRE, fire inspector, building inspector, engineers, traffic, director of parks, recreation and culture, and the police chief were all forwarded these details regarding the application. There was feedback received regarding this transformer pad. I said I'd come back to it. So it has to do with access for fire vehicles. So the original design had this pad placed on the driveway that would go down into the parking underground. And so this was moved because if it was there, a fire vehicle wouldn't be able to access it in the case of an emergency. So it was moved to become in that tree retention area. So it does cut out a small part of that retention area, but for the benefit of it meeting building code, because otherwise it wouldn't be able to meet the building code. And this has to do with access for fire vehicles. I can extrapolate on that to the best of my ability if you have any questions about that. But that was one comment. So in the proposal itself, this has already been addressed, so it's already been moved. There were some other comments, one from the building inspector highlighting that there's a new building code requirement to have at least 2 barrier-free residential units. So this could ultimately affect the configuration of units within the building, because this requires ample room to navigate through the use of a wheelchair. So that is something that could affect the design going forward potentially. And then the town's urban forestry coordinator also provided a report that outlined how to preserve trees and what the native species of trees in the area are. And it's just some requirements for how you can actually go about preserving your existing treescape and making sure that they don't die in the process of going through with your development. This is the public participation, so I'm just going to flip ahead here. Gone through quite a lot of slides. So the development application notice sign was posted in March. There was information posted on the town's current development applications in March with regular updates throughout the process, and there was a mail out to 56 property owners located within 150 meters of the subject properties. That was on April 3rd. In total, on the town website, there were 2 responses. Both were negative, but otherwise there haven't been any other comments provided, nothing written or anything of that nature. So this is just all the information that I went through before. And so the next steps for this application would be to bring the finalized concept to council. It'll include all of the survey results and recommendations from PAC and staff, and that would be their opportunity for a final decision. And that accompanying that will be a final staff report, and this is the recommendation. So that concludes my presentation, respectfully submitted.
Thank you, Planner McPherson. So, as the committee knows, we have a recommendation before us that we can vote on if it is, it is provided for us to either approve or deny or to make slight changes to. Before that, we will have a little discussion on the application, and if there is anybody in the gallery who wishes to speak, we will hear from you as well. So, Councillor Graham, you are first in the queue.
First question, or only question, it's a quick one. It's regarding process. Just wondering about the distribution of the survey. You said that it went to 56 property owners within a 150-meter radius. So did that exclude the tenants in the buildings right there, or were they included?
I might need to measure that out and then come back to you.
I guess really the question is, do we only send the survey to property owners, or do we send it to apartment tenants?
Through the chair, we do only send out to the property owners, not to apartment dwellers. We don't have access to, we don't maintain a database of property owner addresses or tenant addresses. So that'd be difficult for us to do. All we have is the assessment rolls that we rely on from the provincial data, property data. That's where we get our information from. And unfortunately, that only includes property owners. So anything that goes to tenants would be, the only way tenants would find out about it would be through the signage, which tends to be pretty effective, and also notices on the website.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McGrath.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation, Mr. McPherson. Just 2 quick questions. You mentioned there was no request for a servicing plan. Can you expand briefly on that for us, please? Because as I understand, there's a building there, but is the existing infrastructure sufficient for that little house or cabin or whatever is there to handle a 64-unit apartment building? Perhaps that's Director of Public Works wishes to weigh in on that.
We are going to want to see a servicing plan. I had just reported that we don't foresee any servicing issues.
Oh, okay, thank you for that clarification. And then I'm not sure who is best to answer this one, but regarding the stormwater management plan, since we have one, and obviously the requirement is for the water runoff after the development to be less than it was before. Do we know by how much? Because I can't see the technical details on that plan. It's I'd need a couple of magnifying glasses to get in there, but do we know by how much the stormwater runoff is being reduced?
No, I just know that our engineer reviewed it and said that they didn't just do their job of having the post match the pre, but they actually made it better. So,
Okay.
but to what degree, I don't know.
So it
I
is
could probably
reduced, which
find a
is-
value for you.
Yeah, I think if you could find that and provide that to the committee, I think that would be appreciated. Thank you. That's all for now. Thank you very much.
Councillor Thomas, or sorry, Deputy Mayor Thomas?
Thank you. I have three questions. One is regards to the parking. Is the developer?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. So it's 70 spaces, but if we look at it, and last time I asked if we could have a breakdown, and I see there is a breakdown, but if you add up the 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms, 2 bedroom plus den, and the 3 bedrooms, comes to 54 units, not 64. So it's hard for me to figure that all out because, you know, the numbers don't match. But I'm sure, you know, it's 64 units with 70 parking spots, which is, you know, the 1.09 or whatever it was. Do you follow what I'm saying there? Because if you add those up, they don't add up. So when it comes to council, you know, a submission would be made to council, and I would like all those parkings, all the number of and type of unit to be correct so that I can do the math on that, because I'm interested in that, because this site is not downtown, it's a little bit farther, and so just on average, you know, you're looking at 1 space for a 1 bedroom, 1.5 space for a 2 bedroom, and for a 3 bedroom, it's 2 parking spaces, and you have 1 space overall for each unit.
That's
That
correct.
concerns me. So my question to you is what's the rationale that you come up with to just have 1 parking space per unit? You know, because if it's a 3-bedroom unit, I'm probably going to have 2 cars, perhaps, you know, or whatever. It was already stated by the town planner that it's situated a little farther out. It's not downtown. It's a little farther. You can't really do grocery shopping. You really need a way of getting back and forth. I know you have some bicycle there, but can you just speak to the parking for vehicles, please?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. The rationale is basically, number one was to compensate the reduction of the parking spaces. We added bicycle spaces to that's number one.
Right.
The second one is the option to use chair car spaces as well.
Right.
And then the last rationale is basically we live in times that economic constraints, statistically, as you may know right now, is basically kind of forcing society to readjust and to have two vehicles per household, and living in an apartment is becoming a little bit difficult, economically speaking. So based on those rationales, we say that I think that because of those 3 reasons that we kind of rationalize, we could have an argument and present the facts and say that perhaps 70 parking spaces is substantially positive for the development of 64 units. As you know perfectly, if we're moving into the affordability and everything else, I personally argue affordability has to do as well with the fact that sometimes a person can't afford a vehicle because of the insurance, because of the gasoline, because of so many other things, right? I personally, with my wife, we own 2 affordable housing projects in Halifax. And then that we notice that we provide a certain number of parkings sometimes, and then that most of the people, because they live on the bus route, they don't really need the parking. I personally argue in downtown, I say sometimes if we are moving into affordable housing programs, I think we had to revisit the fact that we had to provide better public transportation, bicycles and so many things, chair vehicle cars as well. Now you can have it's happening in Halifax, some areas that we have 2 or 3 vehicles that person can rent on the weekend for a few hours to basically deal with the issue of a parking. I think that we have an opportunity here to kind of bring these issues forward to society as well.
Right.
So I'm not define, but that's what they believe as an
Right.
architect that we should do.
Yeah, the difference between us and Halifax is that we don't have a public transportation system here, and so, so then I look at the building on the lot, and I don't see any room there at all to expand to above-ground parking, which I don't like anyways, so, it is what it is, I guess, but, you could reduce it to 4 stories, then you'd have sufficient parking to meet the requirement. I'm just concerned about where these cars, if people, if you have more cars than you have spaces, where are they going to park? So that becomes an issue,
We have the option to have more parking spaces, but personally I was against.
Right,
The
and
developer.
I'm against it too. I don't want to see above-ground parking.
Yeah, we prefer to preserve the trees, retention zone, and so on and so on. That's
Right.
more.
I worry about that, the
Yeah.
future of that, if you can't do that. Okay, well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
And this has to do with the stormwater management system. Is that system going to be linked up into the town stormwater system? Is that where the water is, the water off the property, is it being linked into the town stormwater system?
The design that the Servant Dambrack presented, basically that's the intention. We have a manhole at the end of the perimeter of the trench that is going to capture the water, filter it, and then move it into the system as well.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
Ms. Deloria?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question regarding the amenity space. I know that the town's director of Parks and Rec had suggested that you include a community garden as part of your application. Have you given any thought into that?
What we did initially was, honestly, the issue of the community garden is kind of new for us in this meeting. So can we include it? Yeah, of course, of course. We focus on using the podium with the seating mat, and also provide a gazebo, and also create the retention, the tree retention area as a part of the amenity space. In addition, we provide amenity space on the inside of the building. But the community garden, absolutely. I support the idea greatly, and we have conversations, particularly with my wife, and I said, listen, part of the problems right now that we have in Canada, we are not producing food per se, right? So I don't see why backyards couldn't become producing tomatoes and different things that we can become more sustainable, right? So I do believe in that. We support those ideas. I designed a building, a large complex in Halifax, Grand Heavens. We have a central club area, club zone, and then basically we create a lot of gardening areas around the area, around the buildings, so people support that and they like it.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're doing that, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Ms. Deloria, is that something you wish to see included in the recommendation?
I think it would be beneficial if that could be, and I mean, the developer agrees to include it as well. So if, I'm speaking for myself, but if the committee agrees, then yes.
Okay.
The only thing that we're gonna have to protect it because of the deers, right?
Okay, is there further discussion about the community garden being a change to the wording or anything else before I ask for a motion? No? Okay, well, I'm going to take your silence as consent to adding the, Mr. McPherson, if you could just make note of this, that we are adding the development of a community garden. I don't think we're getting into the details about it too much, but, or a garden to service the tenants, maybe might be more, I honestly don't know a lot about it. Ms. Deloria, if you want to speak to it more than I do, is it meant for the community or is it meant for the tenants of the building?
No, I just, I was reading the material. I did see that the town's director had requested this, and I support that idea as well. As how it will look like, what it will look like, I am not sure as well.
Yeah.
But I think the developer has some time to, with the planning department, to figure it out.
Okay, we'll keep it broad. A garden to service the community and/or tenants.
Usually it's for the tenants, partly because it requires the superintendent to kind of regulate it and all that kind of stuff, right? If you allow opening to the community at large, then suddenly you are inviting the community into the property, private property per se, right?
Yeah.
So to kind of have some covenants and control by the developer and the property managers and so on, so it's kind of more manageable, I think,
Yeah.
if I may.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. Okay, so, other than that change, can I have a motion to approve the recommendation from staff? So moved and seconded and thirded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any contrary minded? No? Okay, motion carried.
Thank you very much. Lastly, I'd like to thank you all,
Okay.
particularly you and the planners have been a delight to work with, and we've been coordinating every single step along the way. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, and Senior Planner Fox is now ready to go, so he will speak with respect to the West Prince Street Advisory Committee?
Yep.
West Prince Street Area Advisory Committee.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So yes, this is the, talking about municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw amendments for the West Prince Street area and the creation of a area advisory committee. And also rezoning of some lands and redesignation of some lands in the area was the subject matter. This has been before the committee previously, has also been to a public information meeting. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the history of this. I think we're all pretty much familiar with the history of how we got here, and this has been before the committee before, as I mentioned, and also public information meetings. But just for a reminder, refresher, this is the area we're discussing. This is the historic boundaries of the island neighborhood, plus a buffer of additional lands. So just so you orient yourself, that's Juniper Street heading there north-south, and then east-west here is Prince Street. The end of Prince Street off to the south of the screen here would be the golf course. The number 2 Construction Battalion Athletic Facility is over here, and this is Golf Street over here, and then this would be the new ball fields off of Argus Drive off Roby Street. So I'm not going to talk about the background, but I did want to just sort of go over briefly what we're talking about here. We're talking about municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw. It keeps coming up at some of the meetings where there's some confusion from the public as well as I think from committee members as well. It is one of the more complicated parts of planning. When we talk about a land use bylaw and a municipal planning strategy and the difference between the two documents. So just to give you some context here, the town is considering amendments to its municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw. The municipal planning strategy is the document that contains all the land use policies that guide how the town will develop over the next decade. These are broad guidelines that generally set out how the land is to be used and developed and how it's expected to take place over the next decade or so. Land use bylaw, on the other hand, is a document that contains all the land use regulations that guide how the town will develop over the next decade. So that's the regulations. These provide specific details, rules, and mandatory actions that dictate how the land gets used and developed. So one is a policy statement, one is a regulation. And you have to think about a policy as the general rules for how the area might develop. It might say things like new development shall be pedestrian friendly, compatible with neighboring uses or complement surrounding architecture, and that's not really very specific, so it's meant to be very, very open to interpretation at times, but general broad statements. The regulations, which is the land use bylaw, is more specific, and that is, this could be something like saying the limit is 4 stories, or a requirement to have fencing around a shared property line, or a rule about where a parking lot can be located. So these are the detailed instructions, and that's what's found in your land use bylaw. So the policy sets the overall direction and principles, while the regulation provides the concrete details and mandatory actions to ensure those principles are followed. So the things we're talking about today too are the policy area map. That's part of the municipal planning strategy. So it just splits the town up into different policy areas. Every property in town is located within a specific policy area, and each policy area has different policies that guide how the land is to be used and developed. Each policy area also has its own chapter in the town's municipal planning strategy. So if you want to know if you have a piece of land that's in one particular policy area, you refer to that chapter in the municipal planning strategy, and it sets out all the policies that tell you how that land can be developed. The zoning map is part of the land use bylaw, and it splits the town up into different zones, and this is the one that most people are familiar with. Every property in town is located in a zone that controls how the land is to be used and developed, and each zone also has its own chapter in the land use bylaw. So if you're in a particular zone, there's a corresponding chapter in the land use bylaw that dictates the regulations as to how your land can be developed. So just in terms of a little bit more background, this was going back to January when council directed staff to amend the town's plan. And the council specifically requested that the lands along the western end of Prince Street, currently zoned regional service, be rezoned to the urban corridor zone. So this is the zoning bylaw amendment to the town's zoning map. It was also felt that the UC zone, the urban corridor zone, which includes greater protections for neighboring residential uses and which is less permissive than the regional service zone, would be the more appropriate for this section of Prince Street. So council also requested that a West Prince Neighborhood Advisory Committee be established. That committee, primarily made up of residents from the area, would be responsible for reviewing all planning applications on lands in and around the island neighborhood, so the West Prince area. This would include all lands that were historically part of the neighborhood, plus immediately abutting lands. So the amendment process, the steps outlined here, so there's 5 steps really up to the decision of council. And we're at the 3rd step here where we're looking for a final recommendation from this committee. So just to go over the proposed amendments that have been requested by council, and there's a couple of different options here just to complicate matters a little bit, but there is the first option, which is the one that was requested by council, is a rezoning of the regional service. So again, to orient yourself, this is Roby Street across the top of the screen. Juniper's north-south here, and this is Prince Street, western end of Prince Street. Chow family would be here, Truro Toyota, Cat Shack, Dooley's is here. This is the golf course in this area here. The number 2 construction battalion athletic facilities here, and then the Argus Drive ball field is here. So, so this area here, council is requesting that we go from regional service, shown here, to urban corridor zone. So this whole area would be rezoned, and that's what's being proposed. And the amendments would require also deal with a description to amend Chapter 2 of the Land Use Bylaw to include a provision for the establishment of a committee as well. Now, what was also discussed, proposed amendments as requested by council, again, sorry, I'm repeated there. So the other idea was to create the West Prince Area Advisory Committee, and that's it's all set out in the Municipal Government Act that we're allowed to create, the town's allowed to set up a West Prince Area Advisory Committee or a Area Advisory Committee to deal with land use issues affecting a certain area. And that includes reviewing and making recommendations to Planning Advisory Committee on development agreement applications, land use bylaw amendment applications, that type of thing. Again, the West Prince Area Advisory Committee jurisdiction would include this area of West Prince Street, which again is outlined in the heavy dark line here, which is this area historically part of the neighborhood plus a buffer area. So it would include, again, all of the residential area of West Prince, but would also include the Dooley's building, Cat Shack, and some of the commercial uses like Fletcher's, Zach's Auto Sales, Chow Families there, and then Truro Toyota and Kingston Aluminum would all be included in that West Prince Area Advisory Committee jurisdiction. And then there's some discussion here about the makeup of the committee. And then where we are in the process in terms of, the process that would be set up for how the committee would review applications, would give some thought to this, not wanting to sort of replicate any of the things that this committee does. The idea would be that instead of having an entirely separate process and then having to go through this process as well, that we would set it up so that the West Prince Area Advisory Committee would review applications and advise this committee, but there would really only be one additional meeting required. At the step 4, the West Prince Area Advisory Committee would actually replace this committee in its role in reviewing applications right up until step 4, when a recommendation would come from the West Prince Area Advisory Committee to this body. This body would take that information and that recommendation into consideration before they make a decision on it as well. that's what's being proposed. This meeting could actually take place just prior to Planning Advisory Committee, so it wouldn't actually add any time at all to the process. So that's one way of handling it. That's what's recommended. Just in terms of discussion about the proposed amendments, and these are the ones that the ones that are being proposed by council. So for the town to allow any development that would jeopardize the cohesion and integrity of the island neighborhood would be contrary to the town's community goals related to inclusion and engagement. The proposed amendments, creation of the West Prince Area Advisory Committee to review and make recommendations on planning applications in and around the West Prince neighborhood would align with these goals. And the proposed amendments, when considering development agreement applications in the West Prince area, the council and the Planning Advisory Committee and the West Prince Area Advisory Committee would take into consideration the policies of the Urban Corridor Policy Area, which requires greater consideration be given to the proposal's design, landscaping impact on the streetscape, and its impact on nearby residential uses. So this would be more in keeping with some of the town's policies regarding attractive communities. So the implications of the proposed rezoning, the UC zone requires greater consideration given design elements, as I mentioned, and would likely result in higher quality development that improves the appearance of the town. These design considerations may also increase costs associated with development, something to keep in mind. The UC zone has more restrictive height limits and setback buffering requirements, and especially where it's abutting other less intensive zones. So it does offer all those benefits, additional protections for the community. In addition, the proposed rezoning from the regional service to the urban corridor zone will result in the following. So multi-unit residential development will require a development agreement for proposals larger than 12 instead of 18. There are fewer permitted uses, including the removal of many existing uses in the area would be permitted uses. So things like automobile sales and rentals, warehousing, storage, beverage room, lounge, cabaret are all things that would be removed from the list of permitted uses. So several existing businesses would become lawfully existing non-conforming uses, or like essentially grandfathered in. And now a couple of suggested alternative here is to, council may wish to only rezone a portion of the properties on the West Prince area to the urban corridor zone. This could include just those properties that are vacant or that are immediately abut the general residential zone, while other properties would remain zone regional service. This would ensure that all existing businesses remain legal uses. They wouldn't become non-conforming. So this I'm referring to as the second option. And what we'll be looking at here is, again, this is what council was proposing, so that this area, which is currently zoned regional service, would be changed to urban corridor. Also, as part of council's suggested amendments, would be that this area have its policy area designation changed. So these are the policies, the urban corridor policy area. What we're suggesting instead as an alternative to the other rezoning, the council suggested rezoning would be to take the existing businesses in the area and leave them zoned regional service, but except for any vacant lands or any lands immediately abutting a general residential zone over here, would be removed from that urban corridor, from the regional service, and would be zoned urban corridor. And the idea would be keeping the underlying policy area urban corridor, and this would make sure that, so yes, the zone would change, but the underlying policy area would remain regional service. And what that would do would be make sure that any development would still, any major redevelopment proposals would require a development agreement and would have to go through the West Prince Area Advisory Committee and Council for approval. Major developments would be subject to the additional design and neighborhood compatibility considerations that are set out in the urban corridor policies. And major redevelopment proposals would also be subject to review and recommendation by the West Prince Area Advisory Committee. So we had some public consultation on those two options, the council option and then the alternative suggested by staff. Those were held on the 16th of April. We had around 18 people in attendance at those meetings. There were some concerns expressed by your residents, and residents expressed concern about being pushed out by new development, and the future existence of the neighborhood was at risk. Residents wanted more consultation and community engagement input on new development proposals. There was a concern that newer high-density residential uses and commercial development might have a negative impact on the neighborhood. And there was a concern that the proposed alternative, such as the one that's suggested as changing the designation but keeping the regional service zone, did not provide enough protection for the island neighborhood. There were also 4 commercial property owners from the West Prince area in attendance at the 2 meetings. Well, in total at the 2 meetings there were 4. And they expressed their concerns were that the current regional service zone is appropriate for the existing commercial area along Prince and Juniper. They felt that all affected businesses would be made non-conforming by the proposed zoning change, and, well, they would be. They were concerned about that. They also indicated that only the existing commercial use would be permitted, any rebuilding or expanding would not be allowed, and the proposed urban corridor zoning would limit redevelopment options, much more restrictive than the regional service zone. And overall, they thought the impact on property values and the value of their businesses would be a negative impact. Based on feedback from the neighborhood, planning staff are actually recommending a third option. So policy area map changes that would be the same as options 1 and 2. So we'd be changing from the regional service to the urban corridor policy area. The zoning map changes would be the same as option 2. So we would keep the regional service zone in the place for all existing businesses except where abutting a general residential zone. And then option 3 would include amending the regional service zone to limit the intensity of commercial uses permitted in the West Prince neighborhood area. So there would be some additional restrictions placed on regional. It would still be regional service zone for the existing businesses, but there would be some additional restrictions placed in place, such as limiting the height of buildings in the West Prince area to 4 stories or 3 stories within 50 feet of or 48.2 feet of a general residential zone, and also prohibit or limit potentially incompatible or intensive land uses on regional service zone properties in the West Prince area, such as things like adult entertainment, animal hospital shelter, beverage room, lounge, cabaret, emergency shelters, and textile mills, because those are all uses that are permitted in the regional service zone. So again, the options before the committee for consideration would be option 1, which was to establish an area advisory committee to review the planning applications in the West Prince area. Change the policy area designation of non-residential lands in the West Prince area from regional service to urban corridor, and then rezone all non-residential lands in the West Prince area from regional service to urban corridor zone. So that was option 1. Option 2, which was discussed at earlier meetings and also at the public information meetings, was to establish an area advisory committee to review applications in the West Prince area. Change the policy area designation of non-residential lands in the West Prince area from regional service to urban corridor. Rezone vacant lands and lands abutting the general residential zone to urban corridor zone. Retain the regional service zoning for most existing businesses to avoid that non-conforming situation. Option 3, which is the recommended option, which is to establish an area advisory committee to review planning applications in the West Prince area, which is the same as the others. Change the policy area designation of non-residential lands in West Prince area from regional service to urban corridor, which is also consistent with the others, but the differences are rezone non-residential lands in the West Prince area from the regional service zone to the urban corridor zone, which is only similar to option 2. And then the big change here is that we would amend the regional service zone to limit the height of buildings in the West Prince area and prohibit, or limit potentially incompatible or intensive land uses. And then the final option there, of course, is to do nothing at status quo. So just in terms of next steps, based on feedback received to date, the Planning Advisory Committee makes a recommendation on the proposed amendments to Council. Council schedules and holds a public hearing. Council would then make a decision on the amendments following the hearing, and there is no appeal process for amendments to the municipal planning strategy. So there's no appeal process there. And then Council would also adopt the West Prince Area Advisory Committee policy. And that concludes my presentation. There's a lot of information there. I do apologize, but I do have to go over it all to make sure that it's all there on record.
No, that was very helpful. Thank you. We probably have some people in the gallery who might wish to speak, so we do have a microphone that we will pass around. Are there any questions from the committee members? Councillor McGrath.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Fox, can we just back up a little bit to the slide that shows option 3? This one. So the major difference here is amend the regional service zone to limit the height of buildings in the West Prince area and to prohibit or limit potentially incompatible or intensive land uses. Were we not accomplishing that by changing the zoning to urban corridor?
We were. The drawback of the changing of the zoning to urban corridor is that you are making all the existing businesses, which I don't know if those types of businesses currently aren't really an issue for neighborhood compatibility. They've been there for a while, they're established. To allow them to continue without making them non-conforming is kind of the goal from a good planning perspective. So the idea would be to, instead of removing or making those uses prohibited, place limitations on them that would address the issues of incompatibility, things like building height, and then take away some of the more intensive uses to make it so that the zone, while it's still there and protecting existing businesses, it also allows that extra level of protection for area residents, because you're not going to get the more intensive land uses that might happen normally in a regional service zone.
So essentially, the benefit of option 3 is limiting the less intensive zoning without making the existing businesses legal non-conforming.
Correct.
Okay. I would also like to ask regarding if you could, you had examples of some of the items that may not be permitted.
Yeah.
Why is animal hospital or shelter there? When we are talking about residential areas, people have pets. I would think that an animal hospital would actually be a fairly good and compatible use in a residential zone. Perhaps I'm alone on that, but can you speak more on why that one
I
made
think
it
the
finish?
challenge with animal hospitals and shelters is they often include an animal run. We've had this, I guess, this has come up before, and it's one of the uses that we had some additional protections in place on to deal with noise from the animals. But I do know that in a lot of cases, the animal hospitals don't allow animals to be outside unsupervised for any length of time. So it's just thrown in there as an example. It could be something that we decide doesn't need to be there.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Thomas?
Yes, my question has to do with developmental agreements. So moving it from a regional service to an urban corridor, the number of units for multi-unit building, it changes. And I don't know it off the top of my head. I think it's 12 or more. You need a development agreement. I can't remember the precise numbers, but so development agreements will be allowed in this zone, just like it's currently allowed in the urban corridor zone.
So this is the slide that references the changes to the multi-unit residential development. So by going from the regional service to the urban corridor zone, multi-unit residential development will require a development agreement for proposals larger than 12 instead of 18. So that is the key difference between the two zones. The regional service zone does allow for up to 12 or up to 18 units without having to go through a development agreement.
Yeah, so you have to go through a development agreement that's greater than 12, which I thought was correct.
Yeah.
But then you put a limit on the height, and we know that when we deal with development agreements, the height restriction can be removed considering the development. And so is that the same here?
I believe that would be the intent, keeping in mind that all applications would have to go through the West Prince Area Advisory Committee and also would have to go through this committee, the committee for one discussion, and then it would go to council.
So the zoning, essentially, the rules of the zoning of urban corridor are applied here, but it's just the process in which it goes through for approval, if it's a development agreement that has changed.
Correct, and the urban corridor zone policies are a little bit more restrictive and they do deal more with compatibility with neighboring residential uses.
I just wanted to make clarity on that. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have a lull in our microphone queue, so Angela, if you wouldn't mind, you're welcome to raise your hand if you'd like to have the microphone. There is also a presenter's desk if...
First for introduction, my name is Robbie Hutchinson. I own 280 290 Prince.
Oh, sorry. Do you mind, I'll turn on your microphone.
Okay.
So we're limiting speaking to 5 minutes, if you don't mind. And please introduce yourself as you've done, but now your microphone is on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Robbie Hutchinson. I own 280 and 290 Prince Street. My mom and dad started 280 Prince Street, which is incorrectly noted in your minutes as the old Kingston Aluminum property. Kingston Aluminum still exists. When I get my tax bill, the check comes from Kingston Aluminum. It's still an active business. The building that is also a miss from your mention in your minutes is SVJ Investments, which owns 290 Prince Street. For clarity, just so everybody knows who I am. So me and my family have been part of West Prince Street, 280, 290 for 55 years. Prior to many years before that, in the 30s and 40s, just a bit of a history lesson. That area all the way up to the Chow family was the town dump. So our business has been there since 1969. There was a print shop there in 1967. Glassy Motors was there in 1955. Before Zach's was the Rainbow. The Chow family's been there 45 years. Where Dooley currently exists was a laundromat and a car wash, or laundromat car wash type thing in 1952. So the area's always been commercial. How you zone it, regional services, highway commercial, whatever words you want to put, that whole corner and the whole, it's still highway number 2. So I understand the concerns of the residents, 100%. Again, I've worked there for too many years, 42 years. I grew up in that neighborhood, went to Willow Street School, know many of the residences, and to change it from regional services, one of my properties would end up being urban core. My challenge is, and I get the town wants to have some idyllic, wonderful streetscapes and all those things, but it's been commercial businesses for 50 and 60 and 70 years, and now with the will of the community, they want to change it. I get change, but the whole area has changed. I remember when I was the area was sometimes not the best area, but with the residents over time has prospered and things look great down there. It's a wonderful neighborhood, great people. Again, we've been there for 55 years. Never an issue with the neighbors, never. Like, as I was saying, the town wants to be a bit idyllic, and I don't know if that whole corridor of Juniper Street up to Prince Street to the recreation facility, are we going to surround that with, what are we going to call them, flower shops and ice cream stands? It's commercial businesses that have been there for 50 and 60 years, right? If we want to throw some dollars and cents behind it, it's probably $15 million a tax assessment, right? Which is somewhere in the vicinity of $1 million in taxes. So you want to take my livelihood and my businesses and say, okay, you can't do, once you stop doing what you're doing, you can't do anything else. Well, my tax assessment for my 2 properties is $2 million. When you limit what I can do with those properties, once I choose to sell them, or God forbid I die, those properties become far less valuable. So your decisions, right, for the right reasons, right, are financially impacting not only my business, but the other businesses who, if they choose not to do what they do, they can't do anything. I have a 30,000 square foot warehouse at one of my properties, all conforming, everything's right. What in the world do I do with it after the fact, right? It says clearly, as Mr. Fox has clearly stated, well, if it goes to all the urban core, that becomes a big barn that I can't have animals in, as Mr. McGrath pointed out. But where's the financial impact that this is going to cost? Right? I own 3.5 acres, right? Cause no disturbance to any of the neighbors, but now I'm lumped in with the whole general area, right? And as I said, I appreciate Mr. Jackson's efforts on creating an area. We got to start with a line in the sand, and I understand there was a lot of folks on Clark Street, but the whole general turn of the corner has been commercial for 60 years. And now it's like, no, in the idyllic world, it's flower shops and ice cream stands, folks, right? So my businesses and my land becomes, once I sell it or stop doing what I'm doing, virtually worthless, in my opinion, right? And could you find a developer to buy 3.5 acres of land? Sure, the people before me, they were working with 0.8 acres, right? And they're building to be this, and they're that far from the neighborhood, and that's great. So my concern is, the great leap that you folks are looking at doing, right? Second, selfishly, and that's fine by me, I don't mind saying it, it's going to cost me a small fortune because the West Plents Advisory Committee, which hasn't even been created yet, has so much influence, right? No communication from, I get that, just let me finish, I will stop.
Yep.
No communication from any council members has walked through my door, or any of the council or the potential committee members. I know it hasn't been created, but I'm sure there's some talk. No one's come to see, at least me. Has anyone ever gone to see the rest of the business community? Don't know the answer to that question, but thank you for the effort, thank you for the time, but it's more than making it all pretty. These are functioning businesses with many, many families paying taxes in the town, but you want to take it all away.
Thank you. Senior Planner Fox, maybe just so that you can address that, maybe we do need to get a little deeper into the discussion about what non-conforming use means. So I understand there are some terms in the MGA that speak to it specifically. And what would be, an abandonment of use or fire, destruction. What would be the events that would cease the business as it currently stands? What would be the possible use in the future, depending on our different scenarios? And then what would still be permitted, either, what we would consider typically commercial or, of course, larger scale residential, which I guess if we're talking about value of land would certainly be a highest and best use as opposed to, turning them into building lots.
Right. Okay. So I guess the first thing I'd like to point out is the second and third options don't actually make all the businesses in the area non-conforming. There would be one impacted, I believe, that's owned by H&A Travelways. Is that?
Keith Sloman owns 280 Prince Street. SVJ Investments own 290 Prince Street.
Okay. So one of the parcels would be impacted by the proposed zone change. The others would, if we decide to go with that second option or the third option, would remain regional service and wouldn't be turned to non-conforming uses. If the council's option of rezoning the land to urban corridor goes through, then the uses would become, all the businesses in the area would become non-conforming, which means if they cease to exist or operate for a period of longer than 6 months, then they're deemed to be no longer existing uses. At that point, there's a bit of a gray area around interpretation as to if it's vacant, it doesn't necessarily mean that the building is no longer being used for that use. If the argument, there's been some successful arguments to say that the building hasn't changed use, therefore the use is still there. So for the business to cease operation sometimes isn't enough. Sometimes it has to actually, you have to fundamentally change the building itself in order to prove that it's no longer an existing use of the property. But there's been a number of, I'm sure there's some case law around that somewhere, but I'm not familiar with it all. But essentially it's around the idea of 6 months with some gray area interpretation. And if it does cease to operate, then it's subject to the requirements of the new zone. So the only thing that could go into some of those uses would be what is permitted in the urban corridor zone. So there's a number of uses, like large restaurants wouldn't be allowed, car dealers aren't allowed, automobile sales and service isn't allowed. So all the uses that are there would become non-conforming. So that would mean that if they did cease to operate and they change the use, they would have to be a use only permitted in the zone. Yeah, does that answer all your? Okay.
Deputy Mayor Thomas?
Mr. Fox, was any consideration given to the fact that it would be regional service, except under zoning, it would be urban corridor only as it relates to the development of a residential property?
Try me one more time, I'm sorry.
In other words, it all stays regional service, but if there was to be a residential development on the site, that it would have to meet the criteria under the zoning for urban corridor.
I guess there's a number of different ways you can approach that. I think I've kind of done that already as part of the third option. It's not the same approach. It's changing the regional service zone as opposed to changing the urban corridor zone. So it's just, I don't know, it's just different approach to arrive at the same end.
I think it's, I hear the concern loud and clear.
So I think you'll
Loud and
find
clear.
that the two options that I did outline, that the second and third options are intended to address those issues. The third option specifically because When it was discussed at the public information meeting, the second option is you don't rezone all the lands. You, see if I can find the map here. You only rezone lands that are immediately abutting the West Prince neighborhood. The rest of them that have existing businesses would retain their regional service zoning.
Correct, I understand that.
Yeah.
But the one that is on the south side there, which is urban corridor, which is now pink, but it used to be,
This one?
correct.
Yeah.
That one would suffer in its value, in its purpose going
Well,
forward.
it suffers in its value and its purpose to the extent that if whatever redevelopment proposal is going to take place there, you're still allowed to do multi-unit residential. That's still an option that's on the table. That's
But you
regardless.
can't do warehousing, you know, and currently there's a warehouse used as.
Well, you can continue to do a warehouse because it's there now.
Yes, but if it was closed down and the business was sold to somebody else and it sat vacant for 6 months, then perhaps those buildings could not be used for warehousing, perhaps.
Yes, that's correct.
And I don't like that idea at
Well, I
all.
mean, I guess keep in mind, it is one property out of all the properties being discussed here today, and not to diminish it, I'm just saying, keep in perspective that we're dealing with a community as well. So there's a lot of interests at play here, and I believe that the third option, which was allowing all those uses to continue, but putting in place restrictions on things like building height and compatibility with the neighbors, was the option that addressed not only most of the concerns of the business owners in the area, but also dealt with the concerns of area residents.
And that would remove the non-conforming use issue, meaning even if the warehousing ceased for 6 months, it wouldn't mean that use couldn't then
Except for the one parcel, that's this parcel right here, which is the second. All these properties were Kingston Aluminum, I believe, at one point, and now there's just the
Common ownership from my family, but many years ago, zoning laws didn't allow multiple main buildings on a lot. I'm going back 100 years because I'm old, but they were always separated as far as ownership. H&A Travelways owned it at one time, and it was sold for tax planning purposes. I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago to SVJ Investments. Again, same shareholders. It was a tax planning strategy, not material ownership change.
Sorry, I can't remember if it's the top one or the bottom one. Who's first? Counselor Graham.
Just for clarity, could you please put up, unless this is it, I'm having difficulty keeping up, the proposed zoning map of option 3 so that I can compare it.
this would be it.
This is it?
Yeah.
And if I want to do a comparison to how it exists now, what would I look at? Is there something, I'd like to look at both at the same time. Is there something in my package that would help me do that?
I'm not sure. I'd have to look at the.
I mean, you could just look, Counselor Graham, all the stuff that's purple there was pink,
Yeah.
is pink currently.
All this area here used to be urban corridor, or is currently urban corridor. The proposal is to rezone, so this would include Chow Family here, Zach's Auto Sales, a couple of loose additional properties here, Fletcher's on the corner, Hollis Used Auto Sales, Cat Shack, Kingston Aluminum.
Okay.
There's a sewage pumping station, I believe, located here, and then this is Truro Toyota. So those would all be rezoned to, or would keep the current zoning, sorry, and the other properties in the area would go to urban corridor. But the option 3 that I discussed would apply the regional service zone, but would make slight amendments to the regional service zone where any of these properties are located in the West Prince area that are subject to the West Prince Area Advisory Committee. There'd be additional requirements on things like building height.
Okay.
And possibly some commercial.
Uses. Yeah.
Deputy Mayor Thomas?
Okay, I get it.
I don't know what to call the property, but the property under discussion, which is, as I said, it's right next to the residential on the south side. And you pointed it out already, Mr. Fox, and I don't know what the PID number is. That's correct, that property there. the testimony this evening has been that, and I have never heard of a complaint by the residents regarding the use of that property, that is currently being used as a warehouse, currently being used in a commercial way. And the testimony, if I understood right, they've been there for 55 years or 60 years or something, and there's been no complaints. So I don't see the issue of changing that one to urban corridor. Why can't it also stay as regional service?
So if
That's
I may,
my
I'd like
question.
to-
I
I'd like
think it's
to
a reasonable comment and question.
So I'd like to respond to that. I think you'd find if you ask the residents of West Prince, some of whom are here this evening, they feel that any application to redevelop that land under the regional service zone would have a negative impact on community integrity. So you can imagine a potential use going in there, any of the regional service zone uses, which could include a licensed liquor establishment going right next to a single-family dwelling, would be a concern.
But isn't the regional service zone, the purple zone on the map that we're looking at currently, doesn't it also have some restrictions
It does not for
zoning?
It does not for the permitted uses. If you leave the regional service zoning in place for for the properties that are immediately abutting this area, there are potential uses that could happen there that would have a negative
Such as a
impact.
nightclub or something like that?
Exactly.
Okay.
And wouldn't come before this committee or the West Prince Advisory
Okay.
Council.
Are we looking for a vote on this evening?
Yes, we are. Now, it's not to say you have to vote on it this evening. If you feel you need more information,
I'd like to see all the maps in my hands and grapple with the changes, et cetera, that you're
okay,
proposing. if
I'm
that's
going
fine
to
with you.
suggest then that we have to have a special meeting of the Planning Advisory Committee, because I don't think I can continue to do this as part of the regular agenda in order for us to get through development applications.
Well, I think it's important
Yeah.
because of the fact that we're talking about the value of people's property they've owned for 60 years and what they can do with that property and what they expect to be able to do with that property. And that's the same for all of us that live in town. And we all live in a zone and we're all face restrictions and those zones change from time to time. So
I think you will find, though, that the proposal that I put before you, the intent is to address the concerns of the area, of the business owners, as
Right.
well as address the concerns of the
for
residents.
one property.
Well,
That's a bit of a
even then, the reality is what's likely to be redeveloped on that property is going to be a multi-unit residential use, given the current.
Right. Okay, I just want to make sure that I'm completely informed, Mr. Fox. Thank you.
Councillor McGrath?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll keep this brief just in case we are going to move this to a special meeting. But looking at the map here, Mr. Fox, I think you said that option 3 was to keep everything as residential service except anything that abuts the general residential. In the top right of that map up along Gulf Street, there are some general residential, by the looks of things, along Gulf that abut residential service. Does that one need to change, or are we specifically focusing on urban corridor only for those that abut the West Prince general residential?
That was the original intent. If you feel that you want to include properties over off of Gulf Street, then you certainly can do so. And it's regional service, not residential service.
Sorry, regional service in general residential. Apologies. And then just still over in that area, directly across from Clyke Street, there's that one small parcel that is also regional service that I'm every time I've gone by there, it looked like a house, and looking at Google Maps, it looks like a house. Are we concerned that should also be urban corridor, or is that actually a commercial use, or do we know? Just I want to make sure that we get this right.
Are you talking about the little house on Clyke Street?
No, across the street from Clyke Street.
Oh,
There's that large sort of just north of Prince Street there, across from Clyke, west of Gulf. There's that the one square that's
Actually-
pink, and then there's another one that looks. I've always thought it was a house. It may be.
I think
commercial
you'll
use.
find that those were always, if I go back to the original zoning map, it's just following the current zoning boundaries in that area. I'm not proposing any changes.
Okay.
So that's why that's staying the same.
Okay, but for the intent of the request from the West Prince,
It was kind of thought to be outside of the sort of scope of what we were talking about as part of these amendments, because it wasn't really dealing directly with the West Prince neighborhood, and it was dealing with a situation that's existing today and didn't feel the need to change it.
Okay. Final comment is just on, I know Deputy Mayor is concerned about wanting to see some of the maps in his hand and possibly having a delay, possibly setting up a special meeting. I think there would be benefit in having some clarity from our solicitor on some of that gray area about the non-conforming uses, what could constitute the change, because you said there have been some valid challenges before that stopping a business for the period of 6 months was not sufficient to consider that a change. If we are going to delay, then I would request that we get some more clarity from the solicitor regarding that. Because obviously, I mean, the gentleman has spoken, he said no complaints over the last 55 years, or however long it's been, which is wonderful. But part of our committee is planning. We are looking for the future. So when he is no longer operating that business, what then becomes of it? And that's, I think, the key that we need to remember is we need to a lot of what we're talking about doesn't impact now, it impacts decades. And Mr. Fox, I believe you said that even at the beginning of your presentation with the explanation between the land use bylaws and the policy area, the difference between sort of the guidelines and the regulations, that we are looking deep into the future.
If I can just jump in on that point, Councilor McGrath, I think what Planner Fox was saying was, like, we have to read the MGA in a strict interpretation for the benefit of the business owners. So what you're suggesting is having someone review the case law to see if 6 months is sufficient. I think for our purposes, we have to treat it as sufficient, because then that's the risk that the business owners run. We can't be saying, oh, some people abandoned their businesses for 9 months and nothing happened. Like, that to me is outside the scope of what we're looking at. So I think we just take the wording of the legislation for what it is, because that provides the worst case scenario for the business owners, which is what they're providing to us. Does that make sense?
That makes some sense.
Okay. Ms. Deloria?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question regarding some of the concerns that Deputy Mayor Thomas has raised. Could there be a phased approach to implementing these zoning changes to allow businesses time to adapt?
Certainly, I've never really heard of phased-in zoning changes. So I don't know how that would work. I'm not sure it would really, I mean, I don't know if the timing of it is the concern. It's more of it's the fact that it's going to happen. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if the timing would be of any assistance to them or any comfort.
Any comfort? Okay. Thank you.
So I am cognizant of the fact that I haven't let everybody in the gallery speak who I expect wishes to speak. Can we agree that this will be a meeting in and of itself at some point? Because I agree it's something that I think warrants further discussion, and we won't be able to get to the items on the agenda, I think, if we continue. Are people in agreement with that? Okay. I do apologize. Yes.
Thank you. Rhea Parsons again. We've never had an issue with certain businesses and operations that are there that are existing. I mean, your property was my bus stop when I was growing up, and there's never been an issue. If you guys are having that extra meeting, bring in, say, Nevin Jackson or Jude Kleiker or Wayne Talbot or something like that that has our community's best interest as well. I think that'd be a nice add to your guys' meeting.
Certainly. So, I mean, I think the meeting will be made public on the website, and certainly anybody can attend to speak on behalf of the residents. Absolutely welcome that. Councillor Graham?
I was wondering if there's benefit to approving part of the recommendations from staff tonight, specifically item D, which is to establish the Area Advisory Committee. Can we separate that out? And would there be benefit to doing so?
You can certainly, that's a policy of council, so the recommendation that council adopt that policy, I guess you could do that at any time, yeah. It doesn't have to be done hand in hand with this. There will be some language in the municipal planning strategy that will make reference to the West Prince Area Advisory Committee, but not a lot, and I don't think it would be essential to have that change take place, so you could just adopt the policy. But it's not this, it would be a recommendation from this
That's right.
committee to council to adopt the policy and establish the committee.
Well, I would like to do that then, because we don't know at this time what the timing of our special meeting will be, but at least that could move forward as a recommendation to council for council's June meeting. Unless you recommend otherwise for any reason that I may not be thinking of.
I'm not opposed to it, but I guess I just think if you're a committee that's been struck and yet you don't really know what your rules are, you know, like the committee wouldn't be able to speak to anything until the decision was made in terms of the policies and the zoning.
Well, I think we were intending to, because it says approve with conditions. It said to establish an area advisory committee to review planning applications at the western end of Prince Street in and around the neighborhood known as the Island. So that part,
Yeah, I'm definitely not unclear on that. I'm
oh,
just,
sorry.
just wondering if, and Planner Fox thinks it'll be okay, so I would take
Yeah,
his
no,
word
I
for
think,
it, but-
I think what, the committee would just be doing what this committee does, reviewing applications based on the current policies, that's all, until the policies are changed.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
So, how do we go about
You
that?
still
then?
have the floor if you want to make a motion.
Okay. Should the motion include delaying until, or, okay, I'll just deal with this one. How about that? I'll make a motion that we establish an area advisory committee to review the planning applications, or no, we make a recommendation to council to establish an area advisory committee to review planning applications at the western end of Prince Street in and around the neighborhood known as the Island. Is that?
Yes,
Okay.
yep, that's great. A seconder for that? Councilor McGrath? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any contrary minded? Motion carried.
And now are we required to make a second motion to deal with the special planning meeting and to delay?
Yeah, I think you'd be just directing staff to hold a special planning meeting to review the details of the proposed amendments.
I'll pass that to Councillor Thomas to do.
Sorry.
I don't think we need a motion for that. I think we can just advise, can we? Or would you like a motion to advise? Is that what you're looking for, Mr. Fox?
Just to keep it clean, just give me, if you can give me a motion to proceed to hold a a special meeting of the Planning Advisory Committee to review proposed amendments to the West Prince, or to the Municipal Planning Strategy and Land Use Bylaw to deal with the West Prince neighborhood zoning.
So moved.
That's how you get your motion on the floor.
And if I could speak to that motion, perhaps, I need a seconder, then I'd just like to speak to the motion.
Sure. Can I have a seconder for that? Okay. Ms. Sarabel?
Can I speak to the motion?
Yes.
I like the idea of this in the sense that perhaps rather than just an open public session, would it seem good to have this committee meet with that committee and look at the options and discuss it that way? Does that make good sense, or is that,
So you're wanting that committee to be, to be
Struck.
struck first by council and then to be,
yeah, and then deal with some of these questions of zoning, et cetera? Is that,
Council until June.
yeah, but I'm not aware of any projects other than the one, yeah. So,
But presumably, this special meeting would happen before June.
Okay,
But the committee won't be,
I see, I know, because it'll be after June. So I'll leave that in Mr. Fox's capable hands.
okay, so we have a motion with a seconder. All those in favor of the motion from Deputy Mayor Thomas, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any contrary minded? No. Okay. Thank you. So please keep your eyes on the website and other social media information from the town for when that special meeting will take place. Okay, the next item on the agenda is, who's? Okay. It is under Planner Connolly, but Senior Planner Fox is going to fill in on this. So this is an application at step 2 of its proposal. It is Aquaba Developments Incorporated at 730 Yonge Street.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this development agreement application affecting the subject properties outlined in blue shown on the screen. This is the south end of Yonge Street here. You can see the Seek Wilderness is located right here, and McNutt's Salvage Yard would be a little bit further down to the south here. You can just see William Barnhill Drive off to the north west corner of the map of the air photo. Subject lands are approximately 22.6 acres in area, and only about 15.4 acres are proposed to be developed. The lands have approximately 2,600 feet of frontage on Yonge Street, or 795 meters. So you can see again outlined in blue right there is the subject property. The lands are within the future growth policy area. Multi-unit residential proposals with more than 50 units shall be considered by development agreement. This is a proposal for a multi-unit residential development. The properties are zoned future growth, but some of the lands are zoned future growth, but there's also urban growth as well in the area. So the policy area designation is future growth, but the zoning is urban growth with a little bit of future growth as well, just to confuse matters again. But residential developments with more than 18 units shall be considered by development agreement in the urban growth zone. Some views of the subject property, again looking a colder day than today. Another view of the subject property there. So it's the cleared lands on Yonge Street, and then there's a section that's also not cleared, and you can see it's getting down further towards McNutt's, and this would be opposite Seek Wilderness. So in terms of application status, we've already gone through one meeting of the committee, so this is the second meeting, and you may recall that Carla Connolly was the one who presented the original application, presenting this step in her absence. So this is the second meeting. At this point, the concept with any revisions based on feedback from step 1 are reviewed by the committee, and the public are invited to a meeting to provide input on the proposal. So we're at step 2. This is the proposal being put forward by the developer. So what we're seeing here is north is to the left-hand side, and Yonge Street is running left to right here, east to west, or that would be north-south. The proposal is to include some multi-unit development buildings. These are 72-unit buildings, 4 stories, and there's also a 56-unit 4-story building located here. I think that's, 56. And then there's a number of townhouses being proposed and these would be stacked townhouse units, which would be, I guess I'll leave it to maybe they can describe the unit configuration better than I can. And there's also some single townhouse units further down here to the southern end of the site. You can also see that there's a roadway connection here, which aligns with the town's plans for the future growth of the area to the south end of town. So the big future south end conceptual development plan includes a roadway connection as shown here. So that's fitting into our plans. There's a large green space at the center of the site as well. So the proposal varies between 2 and 4 stories. The number of units is around 276 as presented. The building mix is 3 4-story multi-units and 16 townhouse clusters. There's a 27% lot coverage, which includes the buildings and the parking lot. There is a parking for about 250 spaces, which is a mix of below and above grade, and exact numbers to be confirmed, obviously, with detailed building plans. Parking ratio is 0.9 spaces per unit as shown, but again, that would be confirmed with more detailed design. Amenity space, there's over 100,000 square feet of amenity space being proposed as part of the development, including the pond and walking area at the center of the site. So the recommendation here is we're still dealing with the expanded step 5 process, or 5-step process. We've posted a sign on the property, or the developer has. Has been ordered and will be placed on the property as soon as possible. My apologies. Information has been posted on the town's website under active development applications, and we'll do a mail out to property owners within 150 meters or 492 feet. Notifying about the public hearing date, and the next planning advisory committee meeting would also be included in that notification. The third planning advisory committee would include a staff report, highlight any changes, these are the next steps, as well as a full policy review weighing the proposal against the town's planning documents. And also we'd have a recommendation from staff, and a recommendation from this committee as well would take place at the next meeting. And there's a public hearing, including a final staff report, and full policy review would take place at that time as well. And that concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you. And I think we have Mr. Koryanke, but also some of his.
Is there a way I can share that quickly?
Do you have it on a memory stick?
I don't. I don't have a memory stick.
Can we
Sorry
get
about
some
that.
IT support out here?
Sorry about that. Oh, will this just go in? Even better. Let me try to find it first here. Sorry about that.
Not a good sign.
Don't you love when technology doesn't cooperate? Oh, there. Sorry, it was Wi-Fi I was trying to get on. While I'm connecting here, I will introduce myself. My name is Connor Wallace. I'm a planner and consultant and principal at ZAP Consulting. I am filling in tonight for my colleague and business partner, Greg Zwicker, who I believe was here presenting on the first meeting for this application to the Planning Advisory Committee. I'm here tonight to present our SEPC application. I do have a small presentation to share with you this evening, if technology cooperates, which it looks like it's on well on its way, and really have just a few minor updates to share with you as well as I get into it. I do have it on this one. I think I might be good now, if I can. I was just trying to get Wi-Fi, but I think I got it now. Here we go. There we go. We're up. We're live. Thank you. Okay. Sorry about that. Thank you for your patience. I really appreciate it. So yeah, we're here tonight to present an updated status on this application. Thank you, Jason, for your presentation on the details of the application in terms of its location and the status of the process. This here is really just a conceptual rendering showing a portion of the development. As shown on the site plan in Jason's presentation, there is a existing stormwater pond feature within the development that will have some multi-unit residences flanking it. So what we developed was just a conceptual rendering of how that may appear in the future. Obviously, this is an exact detail. It's meant to just give a sense of the space that's looking to be created. This is a site plan, as was shared earlier. It includes primarily 3 housing typologies, multi-unit residential with 3 buildings surrounding an existing pond, as noted on the site plan there and reflected in the conceptual rendering. It also includes 2 townhouse typologies, one being traditional townhouse typology with single dwellings in each townhouse, whereas we're also proposing stacked townhouses that would include 2 dwelling units in each townhouse section, which I'll get into some images of those examples later in my slides. This is just a kind of axometric viewing, showing a bit more of it 3-dimensionally. Again, just really conceptual massing of buildings here. But the idea is to show a general scale of it as it relates to the landscape. So I wasn't present at the meeting before. I had a great discussion with Greg and got some insights on what was discussed at the previous committee meeting. And what we heard was regarding some of the unit mix, looking at a good distribution of that, of having some multi-unit as well as some larger units that are stacked and even larger for families. Some requests regarding some additional details on landscaping, info on how sustainability may be addressed within this development, and more info on how the stacked townhouses would be designed or addressed within the development as well. So I've got some details to share on that. This is a bit more of a detailed site plan that we prepared, showing generally how landscaping can be integrated in development. Now, by all means, this isn't a detailed landscape plan developed by a landscape architect. It's meant to show how the development can include landscape elements and integrate with some of the existing natural features that are within the lands or surrounding the lands, showing how it can link into existing trails, maintain undisturbed areas where there's watercourse features, particularly to the south portion of the site, and then showing kind of with these dotted hatch areas how landscaping can integrate both in the front and rear yards of buildings, and maintaining the existing pond with a landscaped area and trail surrounding it as an amenity for the community that's being developed. So again, can refer back to this as we get into questions, but the idea is just to show conceptually where landscaping can exist. And then this is really, again, another high-level conceptual rendering of how the development could function or look as it's full build-out. There are different partnerships that are being developed and brought forward within this development as well, between the landowner and sustainability partners, looking at elements within building design to promote sustainability measures such as solar roofing, as you can see in the concept rendering here. And then here's some more details on that partner. They're called S2E. They have focused on and create 7-generation communities. Oh, sure, of course. This one here? Or was it this one?
The partner right now.
Oh,
At least
okay.
mine is,
I think that's what we're all seeing. But you want to go back?
yeah, I don't think Chantel also.
Okay, maybe just for the sake of maybe this part, maybe let me know once can you guys all see this one that's up here? It's got, okay, great. Okay, maybe you could be kind of my confirmation here. Thank you. So yeah, really they're, and sorry, I'm gonna flip to another one here just to show how, this is a large table with a lot of information here, but it's really showing how they approach development and look at development from a different lens as it relates to health, efficiency, and carbon footprint. So very, unique and alternative ways to look at development, particularly from a sustainability lens, is what this partnership is bringing to the development. And I'm going to flip back to a couple slides here of a project that they have worked on and are continuing to develop in London, Ontario, called Eve Park. Not yet? Okay. We will wait. Okay.
He's got Eve Park. Eve Park, yeah.
Okay. ultimately, I think the message here is this is, and certainly we can follow up and provide slides to the committee as well, and certainly can have any follow-up conversations in their subsequent meeting. You're seeing it now? Okay, great. As obviously, as you can see here, is kind of a unique and interesting form of multi-unit dwelling housing. Not necessarily say that this is what's being proposed here in exact. However, what is being proposed within this partnership is to bring that lens of sustainability to the development, and recognizing that this is land that can be developed with a lot of opportunity to bring that. So this partnership is a great opportunity to move that initiative forward. With regards to the stacked townhouses, I will speak to that briefly. So stacked townhouses are a great way to introduce alternative housing type and within this community and within the greater town. That is great for whether it's ownership or rental based. It provides 2 units within each townhouse form, and they're stacked vertically on top of one another. So what that can look like in real life is this is a conceptual rendering. And ultimately what you can see is what looks, not yet, no, that's okay. Ultimately what that looks like as you're approaching these developments from the street is every residence has a doorway and a porch facing the street. So sometimes that looks like you may walk down to your entrance or you may walk up to it. Ultimately it has that kind of ground-based housing form that has those front porches and experiences for the residences to access them. And so this is what's being proposed as it relates to the stacked townhouse units, providing a mix of residential housing types within that ground-based form. There's also townhouse units that are proposed that are your traditional 2 to 3 story single dwelling unit type arrangements. And I got a couple more images here. I know the slides aren't keeping up with me, but these really represent how these forms can relate to the streetscape. And again, really having that kind of front porch, front access type experience is what's being proposed. These represent more of how the townhouse units could look as more like kind of the freehold style townhouse units. They could have some interesting roof lines, integrating solar elements, things like that. Still at early stages, obviously, and haven't gone into the full detail of those design elements, but really great and interesting goals to bring to this development. There was some discussions as it relates to parking, and Jason, I know you had noted in your slides as well. I had some discussions with Greg and over the past week, and we've been looking at within our design accommodating 2 parking stalls per townhouse unit itself. So those will include driveways that can, although they may be more of like a stacked arrangement for parking, like your traditional driveway, they are able to accommodate 2 stalls per unit. And then overall looking at more closer to a 1.3 ratio of parking per unit, recognizing that, as came up in discussion earlier tonight, that parking in locations like this can be of necessity just due to their access constraints. So that's one thing we're looking at as well. So that's all I have for tonight. Apologies for all the technology mishaps and not being entirely prepared, but I appreciate your time and certainly open to any questions any committee members may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace.
If I may, Madam Chair, I just wanted to, hopefully I can do this without messing everything up, but yes, okay. So I made a mistake earlier and I want to clarify. Seek is actually here. So Seek Wilderness is down here just off the bottom of the screen. This is the trail into Victoria Park here. So the bulk of the development is actually up here. So Seek's actually further down. So my apologies to any confusion there. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Thomas.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for considering the landscaping,
Of course.
It's a start, right?
Yeah.
And I think I was one that brought it up, at least I know I brought it up last time, the importance of treed streets, et cetera, to break it up and to make it more attractive, right?
Absolutely.
I'm just wondering about this pond. If I look at the topographical lines, it's obviously the lowest part of the property. And does it currently have standing water there? Yes. It does. Okay. So, excuse my voice, it'll come back. Here it comes. So, so just stormwater management, is there an exit to that? So it'll just like water from the property was going to pour into this, surface drainage off the property and into this low-lying area, which is an existing pond. And at this point, that's your stormwater management plan?
Ultimately, we haven't gotten into the full engineered details of that. Very good question. And ultimately, yes, the existing pond will be looked at and utilized as a potential solution to managing stormwater on site. The site is currently undeveloped land. So as that relates to stormwater management, we will have to balance pre and post flows.
Right.
So the opportunity there may be with that existing pond is it to be utilized as a site feature to help balance that. So it can be used to store
As a buffer.
as a buffer, essentially. It's a natural feature that can be utilized.
Right.
The exact engineering of that hasn't been completed to date.
Right.
If we do require that information through the remainder of the process, we can certainly provide that and willing to work with engineering team to do that.
I'll leave that with the planning department with you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I would like to see more detail on parking. I'm encouraged that you're now talking 1.3 per unit when it was like 0.91 or so. So I think that's an improvement, going in the right direction. Just the ownership of those townhouses. I mean, I think 60% of people in Truro live in an apartment, and I like to push the idea of home ownership. And I would love to see some of those townhouses, available for ownership.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's a really great point. I think there's a couple great opportunities that could lead to potential of home ownership as it relates to this development. The townhouses themselves do have a significant amount of frontage on public streets that are either existing, whether it's Yonge Street or planned streets that are to be developed within it. What that creates is opportunity for subdivision to create home ownership. There's also great opportunity within stacked townhouse arrangements and townhouse arrangements too for condominium style ownership. Right. And what's great about that too, as it relates to your point of landscaping, when you create those types of bare land condominiums, you can create common ownership around landscape elements to maintain their operation and maintenance and things like that, so they can be maintained in perpetuity through common ownership of the owners. Yeah. Still provides opportunity for home ownership and ability to create equity and all those types of things, perhaps in a bit of a different arrangement. I think all of those types of opportunities can be considered within these townhouses though, because of those conditions.
Right. So that you mentioned it, that opportunity to build equity.
Correct. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Of course.
Councillor McGrath.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Wallace, for being here. Yeah. And thank you for the presentation, even with the technical difficulties. I won't ask you to change any slides. You're right where I want you to be for right now. And this, to start, I'm just looking at the trail link to the neighboring lands, and I just want to make sure that I sort of understand this, because it's not in the legend, but it is labeled down here. Mm-hmm. So there's that, if we go directly down from the pond, there's that treed area, and then we've got these dotted green lines talking about trail links to neighboring lands. Do you own those neighboring lands?
No, those are not subject to this application. I think the opportunity that we're showing with this at a conceptual level is showing how there could be connectivity to those lands if they were to be developed in the future. For example, to my knowledge, they are also within part of this future growth boundary area, as we are accommodating future road connections that way. Mm-hmm. I think the idea is that at the moment, whether they're connections to more passive recreation of trails, although they're not under the ownership of our client, the ultimate, I think, vision for that is that there is this open space pond feature that's part of this development, and creating connectivity from pathway perspective to neighboring lands should they be developed. I think is the thought behind that particular situation, if that makes any sense.
That does make some sense. My concern is, I hear sometimes people say, "Oh, but what about my view?" I'm like, if you didn't own the view, then you can't control it. Yep. And having these trails sounds great in theory, but if you don't own the land, then you can't control it. And
Councillor,
yep.
If I may, just for your information, those open space connections were included at the request of town staff and our initial meetings with the developer. And the reason they were requested was because our plan for the south end of town shows open space connections through the site into lands to the west.
Excellent, because that was where I was going next, was to ask you, with this roadway that's proposed on the left of the screen and continuing down, we do expect development in this future growth zone, correct? So these trails may not be as they are laid out now, but there will be connections to hopefully whatever is there. And Mr. Fox, I don't know if, will there be a requirement for any of that future development on the bottom of the screen there to connect the neighboring properties?
That's the plan, yes.
Okay, thank you. And then so following these trails wherever they may end up eventually through the undisturbed area over presumably toward the Seek Wilderness area and the rail yard trailhead that's over there. I assume that's where that connection is going to go.
Yeah.
How are we getting across Yonge Street? Is there going, and that may be a question for the traffic authority, but I'm trying to think of, I know I'm pretty sure it's a 50-kilometer zone there. It may get up to 70 at that point. No? Stays 50? I'm not sure if everybody stays at 50, but I do believe the signage stays at 50. I'm
Fair.
seeing some shaking of the heads in the galleries, people agreeing that people are probably not doing 50. I'm thinking of safe crossings into that area, because I think this is great. We've got all this adjacent to nature, adjacent to the park for people to be able to get in, go for hikes, bike rides, skiing in the winter, etc. I think that's all great, but I want to make sure that people can get there safely. So I'm not sure how that factors into your development, if that's something that the town needs to look at. I'm looking at our two directors in attendance for their
That would be
feedback.
outside of the scope of this development application, but it's something certainly we can look at. Sure, the traffic authority, probably be a new traffic authority, because I believe Mr. McKinnon may retire by the time this comes to be, but the idea is that, yes, we could look at coming up with ways to facilitate safe crossing along trail connections.
Perfect, and you said the magic words, it's outside the scope of this development, so we will move on. I fully agree with Deputy Mayor Thomas about the mix of rental and ownership. As we've said about the unit mix, it's great to have a unit mix. Some people only want a little bit of space, some people need more space. Some people want to rent, some people want to own. I am a big fan of options, so if there's an opportunity for some people to purchase some of these units, I would be very supportive of that. Now, where I disagree with Deputy Mayor Thomas, of course, is on parking. And I mentioned this to Mr. Zwicker when he was here previously. Have you guys looked any more into car share? I know there's a lot of other developers and developments that have been investigating that idea. Is that anything that you guys have followed up on with regard to limiting the number of vehicles that need to be stored at any given time?
Yeah, no, great question, and certainly something that we've been looking into following our last discussions as well. As I mentioned, discussions and partnerships have been made with that sustainability organization as well. As it relates to their goals and they develop lands, obviously car dependency has a massive impact on that. So it's ultimately going to come down to balancing all of those needs and interests around what tenants in this development may require as it relates to car service and car dependability, what there is in terms of market need for the area as it relates to the specific context in Truro, and then ultimately for the sustainability goals for the projects, kind of balancing all those factors. I think there's definitely opportunity for partnerships and opportunities around car share and other things to be had within a development like this. All of those things are new and interesting opportunities for this development and the town of Truro in general, I would say. What I would say beyond that is that this development is set up in a way that can support a lot of those types of initiatives and systems as well. So we are early days in those conversations with that organization, but I think it's certainly something that we're working on balancing here is around parking and car dependency versus the sustainability initiatives of the projects, and recognizing what that balance need is for the committee, for council, and for our client as well.
Perfect. Yeah, because I do think, again, it's all about options, right? And one of the things I do like about this is, because you just said it yourself, the market. What does the market demand? And I think you've got room here for flexibility that if you needed more parking, you could add it. If you find the parking is not being used and when the time comes to repave it, you might decide, you know what, no, we're just gonna reclaim that and plant some trees, put in a little solar garden, a gazebo, whatever. I like that flexibility about this. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Ms. Delorier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Just a couple questions. Well, actually one, because you answered one about regarding the trails connecting to Victoria Park. In your proposal, you mentioned about the pond. And I don't know if you have given any thought of this, but will it be accessible year-round? And how safety is going to be addressed around it as well?
Absolutely. Very good questions. I think we are certainly looking at the pond as being a feature of the development, as it's shown in the concept plan in here with having walking trails and things around it. The pond is also being considered as potentially part of the stormwater management system within the development. So that will come down to coordination with the engineering design of that and with town engineering to understand how that exists and functions and relates to the public spaces from a safety and liability standpoint. Sometimes these types of ponds can be quite more interactive, and other times they need to have safety measures in place to mitigate that kind of interaction between people surrounding it and its use as a stormwater management pond. So I don't have that exact details today. I think the ultimate goal of it is that safety is obviously paramount to everything, and then ultimately with the goal of this being a feature of the development, not necessarily letting safety create spaces that are super uninviting. So that's a balance that we're going to be working on in detail with our design team and with engineering.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone in the gallery wish to speak? You, sir? Okay, can you just hang on for the microphone? Oh. Oh. Okay, sorry, not this one. Okay, okay.
That's okay. That's okay.
Yes, thank you. This is beautiful. I wish I knew about it before I spent millions of dollars on my own wilderness destination. It's a mini city on Victoria Park, so I have a lot of concerns. I have a lot of concerns about light pollution, noise pollution, and ultimately protecting Victoria Park and my own investment ultimately. But there are thousands of homes on Victoria Park that have existed forever. But these are homeowners that have a lot of pride and protection of the park. So I worry about thousands of new residents on the park that maybe don't have that relationship or connection with the park, necessarily wanting to protect it and preserve it. Is a lot more traffic on the park. As someone that's just gone through the whole step tourism process, sustainability of the park was paramount in the conversations. This has to be part of the development. It was certainly part of the development with Seek, and it has to be paramount with, I feel, any future development on Victoria Park. I know it's on the opposite side of the road. It's really nice. It looks really, really nice. I would want to live there. It just makes me very concerned for the area. It makes me concerned for the business and the thousands of people that come to Seek and the offspin of that, the economic development that it's brought to the region. They come because they love the park and they love the town and they love the nature and they love the protection of it. And I'm very concerned about now they're driving through a mini urban city and what that does to the vision of the area, even though it's beautiful. And I love the sustainability factors, but I have serious concern about the thousands of people that could potentially, between this development and the one next to it, that are now in the area, and really what it does to both Seek, of course, in my own multi-million-dollar investment, but to the park, and also to the businesses that I pray actually come as my neighbors, that enhance and are part of the economic development for the region, that if I was gonna buy it and I saw this, I wouldn't want to. Because it's now, a lot of people like facing your business. that were built and about nature and protection and solace and peace, and this is kind of the opposite in a lot of ways. Yes. Yes. And I know that the town, like, I know it's growing, and I know this is going to happen because it's inevitable. And the future road, I didn't know about the future road, but I know it's all going to happen because it's the only land left. But we really have to think long term what it does to Victoria Park, and what it does. It will probably go ahead and great, but really think about all the businesses that you hope come and line itself along the park, what it does to them as well, because you may not get them.
The mic, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, go ahead. It's
Uh,
okay.
Do you have, I hear your concerns, and I think they are very valid. Do you have any suggestions about how your business and the vision of the park that we all share, how you can coexist in a successful way? Did you have thoughts about that?
Well,
Oh,
I mean,
and as a second part, are you currently experiencing any challenges with the developments that already exist beside this one?
no.
So that's good, at least.
You would think I would, but I don't. Like,
Oh, so that's good.
yes, and it's like probably then, and I know it's selfish because it's my own business I'm protecting, but when people come up, the number one comment that they have is how quiet it is. And the minimal light pollution and the solace that comes, and the neighbor hopefully that comes beside me will be seeking those same things.
Yeah.
And so you can't control what tenants do.
No.
And when people are living there, you can't control the noise. You can't control hundreds of people, hundreds of units, and what may transpire there. Even though it looks like it will attract a very nice demographic of people, you can't. I really am also worried about the traction into the park from those particular entry points. That comes up regularly in terms of on the trails, like having hundreds of people on certain trails at a time. Like, these are important conversations to have, because now you've built it and you've got all these people, and now there's just like potentially thousands of people going on the same trails, and what that does to the park. And that's beyond me, but I think those are important conversations. I mean, I also think, oh wow, like, look, there is potentially there's no sidewalks up there. Like, you can't, they wouldn't be able to do anything until sidewalks were put in, because it would be unsafe for people to even be walking on Yonge Street. And because there's people that drive so fast up there. But I like, it's nice that, yes, you could have all these new customers or for other businesses, that now there's all these people that are living there, and let's say a healthy restaurant went across the street. Well, now they've got potentially thousands of new customers. That's great. I just think you have to look big picture. And how, I don't really have the answer. I guess that's why I'm here, to learn about how we can work together, because I'm very concerned that, with the development of the area, how noisy it becomes, but also having all of these people live there, and basically Seek Wilderness Accommodations is no longer Seek Wilderness Accommodations. I might as well put a hotel up.
So I think we're at stage 2. We're at stage 2 now. At what point does our Parks and Recreation Director weigh in? Because I think Ms. Carney has raised some really valid issues that may be best suited to have our Parks and Recreation Director look at.
It would usually take place between now and step 3,
Okay. So
next meeting.
great. So she will, I wonder if there's an opportunity to have the two connect.
Notes are being taken. Okay, thanks. Anything else?
Yeah, I'd just
Sure.
like to respond. And first of all, thank you for coming and sharing all of that, and I appreciate your perspective. I think there's a lot that can be learned from your perspective, and a lot that this development can bring forward to work in a collaborative way towards that goal. Because I do think that the owner and developer here recognizes the asset that Victoria.
Mr. Wallace, sorry to interrupt you. I'm going to suggest either that you take the microphone from Ms. Carney or you turn your back to her, which is rude. But
Yeah, I think that that's a common recognition as it relates to developing these lands as well, and recognizing that the investment that you've made as an organization in that as well, and the type of offering you're providing too. So certainly something that throughout the remainder of this process and as this unfolds, that we want to be cognizant of, and also want to be recognizing as an asset to this community, not something to abuse. And your concerns are valid around that. And I think there's a lot of intention that needs to go into addressing that from the onset of developing community around this, and not new community, it's part of existing community. And hearing these types of perspectives is important, and we can and are eager to work together to solutions. So I don't know what those are exactly either, but I think you can get them as long as there's a collective goal. So thank you for showing up.
okay. Thank you. Councillor McGrath?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Madam Chair. Just quickly, thank you, Ms. Kearney, for being here. Obviously, always appreciate your insights, and certainly can't deny the impact that SEEK has had on the town. Mr. Fox, regarding the concerns of Ms. Kearney around, like, say, light pollution, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have items in the land use bylaws, or perhaps just regular bylaws, regarding light pollution, having the shade so that it doesn't shine onto adjacent properties. Can you speak more to that, perhaps, or do you share the concerns that we may be dealing with some light issues?
I think you're still going to get light issues probably from things like street lights and that kind of thing, but the bylaws that we have in place, and our land use bylaw actually does speak to having full cutoff fixtures and prohibiting light pollution and that sort of thing. So those are addressed as part of our normal requirements. But to any development of this size, you are probably going to get some light from just people's lighting up their like their homes, and the light coming out of the windows and things like that. So like that, there will be some of that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I don't know if there's also a comment about noise, but we have noise bylaws. But again, there's going to be a general level of noise associated with any urban kind of development.
Right, thank you, Mr. Fox. Mr. Wallace, I don't know if it's possible, I know we don't have a full landscaping plan yet, but perhaps it's possible to add a little bit more of a tree buffer along Yonge Street there that might help mitigate some of that light and noise, if that's something you want to take back and investigate with, was it S2E or Sustainability who's doing your landscaping?
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. I think that's an item we can look at as it relates to certainly how the development connects with Yonge Street as it relates to environment and light pollution. Mm-hmm. One thing that we did put some intent to as it relates to development as well is focusing it northerly. All of the development is focused north of the watercourse, and the remaining of the lands are to remain undisturbed, even south of the watercourse as well. So we are cognizant of trying to keep it as north focused as possible to keep those undisturbed areas remaining. Great point along Yonge Street, though. There's some opportunity there to bring some landscaping or even maintain existing tree buffers that are there.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Thomas?
Yeah, thank you. All I want to do is just reinforce those ideas, that sensitivity to the fact that there's a business next door that is a wilderness experience. So the sensitivity of lighting. I know there's bylaws, but there's also, you can also take a look at what lighting you're using. Yes, it meets the basic criteria, but you know, that fixture, you know, how good is it at keeping light in, you know? And again, the landscaping, how important that landscaping is to the project. And just having, when the landscaping is done, the sensitivity of the fact of the environment in which you're putting this building in, that it's right next door to a wilderness experience site. So yeah, I'll just leave that with you, but I just wanted to, you know, yeah.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
One last comment just from me. Do you mind, Mr. Fox, just remember you had said that you'd misidentified where Seek was in comparison. Can you just take us back to that slide?
Oh, good. Do I exit? Here?
No, I
Okay.
think you're good.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So, yeah, I just wanted to point out that, so Seek is actually located here. Here's the driveway entrance in, and here's the actual accommodations portion is here. And McNutt's is over here. And then you can see there's a low-lying sort of water course that runs through the area here. This is the parking lot for the trail connection into Victoria Park. The development that's being proposed would start right about here. It kind of lines up just with this property line right across the street. This would be the first of the townhouse units, the 2-story townhouse units would be located right in this area.
Thanks.
Sorry, since you have that up, I know I don't have the mic, but where is that road, the future town of Truro, like obviously municipally owned road that you had on that map that was gonna point down towards industrial?
Oh, it's here.
Right at the northern boundary.
It's right along the northern edge of the property. So it runs in here.
Yeah. And it will connect down to, I know it's not the topic of conversation, but it connects down towards industrial.
Well, the idea is that we didn't want to have development happen back here that would, well, be precluded by the fact it had no access to Yonge Street, because William Byron Hill's actually controlled access, or limited access. So we wanted to make sure there was connections through here. So the future development plan for this whole area of town does include a conceptual kind of layout for streets. And one of those streets runs right here. It does potentially connect a future road network over here and connect to William Byron Hill, but wouldn't be a direct connection. There'd be like other roadway. You'd have to drive on another street to get to William Byron Hill or another street to get to, you know what I mean? It wouldn't be an arterial connection or anything like
Sure, I
that.
understand.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. I think we have lots to take home on that one, and thank you everybody for your contributions.
Thank you all for your time.
And okay, the next thing. The next item on our agenda is staying on Yonge Street, 656 Yonge Street. This is step 2 in the application, and I believe it's Mr. McPherson's file. So I will let you speak.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to everybody who has stayed to the very, very end for 656 Yonge Street. As you mentioned, this is step 2. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, okay. So this is a development application for a multi-unit residential development, and it was made all the way back in January 8th of 2024. It is in step 2, so this is the initial community engagement, so there's going to be an opportunity for members of the public to speak today. And so this is sort of the stage where, after providing some comments, the applicant has had the opportunity to make some adjustments to the site. There's also been some adjustments that have sort of been made regardless of the comments that were made, and we'll be going through those very shortly. So here we have the subject land. So this is 656 Yonge Street. Here in the yellow is the subject properties. They're approximately 2.43 hectares in area and have 145 meters of frontage on Yonge Street, which you can see over on the right here. This is Yonge Street. And you can see the way the lands are close to the entrance of Victoria Park, as well as the Rail Yard Mountain Bike Park. This section of Yonge Street is partially undeveloped, although there are some older residential areas to the north and south along Yonge Street here. Here we have the subject site. So this is a view of the lands looking north along Yonge Street. There is a single-story, I believe it's a storage building on an otherwise vacant, undeveloped lot here. Most of the property is level and has been cleared, and at the northern edge, the property is wooded. at the northeast corner of the property adjacent to Yonge Street, the land slopes down to a water course located just off the property. You can see the water course in blue here. So here we have our policy area map, and it shows that all of the lands here are within the future growth policy area. And this is an excerpt from our zoning map. So you can see that in the northeast corner here, we have the urban growth zone in purple. And then most of the remainder of the lot here is within the future growth zone. And it just cuts in a tiny bit in the northeast, which is the environmental reserve, and that's related to a water course. So there have been some changes to the proposed development, and I'll be going through them in a bit more detail. But the first thing that I'll talk about is the parking. So initially, the parking had been all underground. And so the response that we heard back from the applicant is that they're actually looking to take this underground parking and essentially push it up a floor. So the idea is that the underground parking would become at-grade parking, and it would essentially cause all of the buildings to go up a floor. Now this changed a little bit as we got some additional designs in, and I'll cover this off maybe just to show you right now. So the initial design, you can see over here in the east, there are all the townhouses. I'm talking about these multi-unit residential structures right here. This was the initial application. So it had one building that was 6 stories, one that was 5, and another that was 5. And the new design here, it's got 3 6-story multi-unit residential buildings. So these two have been pushed up, essentially 1 floor, and they would all have at-grade parking. This one at the top was only 6 stories, and it remains 6 stories. So the number of dwelling units in this proposal has actually gone down because the first floor here would be taken up by parking. So that's the first big change. So the second big change is that you can see here on the south, there was a proposed street. So what's happened since then is that the applicant has sort of changed the design here. So on the south here, we have a reserve for a right-of-way. And the idea here is that the applicant would reserve that right-of-way to allow the municipality to construct a public road at a later date. And this section of road that you can see here at the east portion of the lot would feature a laneway with surfacing built up to a municipal standard, with the idea that this laneway could be later completed with all the other requirements like curb and gutter and those sort of things in order to meet a municipal standard. And so those are the main changes to the proposed development. So the new proposal consists of 3 6-story multi-unit residential buildings, each containing 65 units, plus 4 3-story townhouses containing 24 units, which makes for a total of 219 units. The parking, if you were to just look at these multi-unit buildings, the ratio would come out to 1.12 parking units per dwelling unit. So that's the ratio for these multi-unit dwellings. The exact number of parking spaces for the townhouses has not been fully identified yet. Just one last thing that I'd like to point out about this proposal is that considering that the height of the buildings in this property, there's a pretty low setback, so it's just under 4.5 meters. And so it doesn't necessarily meet the normal requirements in this zone. And it is quite a low setback just considering the height of the building. So this is an update. It shows the elevation of one of the proposed 6-story multi-unit residential buildings. And now we're going to move on to our enabling policy. So this is policy Future Growth 26. And it essentially allows council to consider the proposed multi-unit residential development in lands within the future growth policy area. We also have these 2 other policies, which essentially state that for this area of town, council has adopted the South End Future Growth Area Conceptual Plan. This was conducted as part of the recent plan review. And here you have the plan, which essentially you can see here, we've got the west to east William Barnhill Drive, and then up in the top right, you've got the Empire Loop. So essentially this plan is what enables the requirement of this road here off of Yonge Street which was originally going to be a complete road as part of this development. Now it would just be a right-of-way. So that's what this plan requires. So that's why this is here. And here you can see the subject land. So this is where that road would be. Moving on to public participation. So a development application notice sign will be posted on the subject lands later this month, and information will be added to the town's website as it becomes available, and a mail-out will be sent out to property owners within 150 meters of the subject lands. Currently, this project is at step 2, so it was the opportunity to respond to the committee's comments, which there weren't too many comments, mainly just regarding the number of affordable units. But this was an opportunity to show some of the development that has happened and changes with the site plan. And the next step will be step 3, which is the main community engagement portion. And that's, you know, staff's opportunity to review all of the policies as they relate to the proposal and to provide a report, and for PAC to produce a recommendation. And that's the end of my report, respectfully submitted.
Thank you, Planner McPherson. Can you advise the committee who you deal with? I don't think anybody is here from the applicant. Is that
I
right?
work with Connor Manson. He's the architect. He does send his regards, just because this meeting, or specifically this application, it was delayed a couple times now. If you remember, the last time it was going to go up, it got sort of pushed because the meeting had gone so late.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. But he's not the owner. He would be the architect, you said?
Yeah, it's Goshen is the applicant, but it's done under like a Nova Scotia limited
Yeah.
application.
Okay, thank you. Because since we have no one in the queue, maybe I could just ask a question too, which is the reasoning behind the change from the road development to just the, I know you're calling it a right-of-way, but it's also sort of an access. Anyway, can you just speak to that, what the reasoning is behind that change?
I've not received like a full detailed explanation of the reasoning behind it, but it would be my understanding that it would come down to the cost of building a full road to municipal standards.
So it would be something that initially was part of the application and is therefore sort of an add-in for the town, and now that's being pulled back.
That's right. So this, you can see the proposed street here. This was the original application.
Okay.
So just for some, I don't know if this is going to add anything to probably confuse things more, but the proposed street is the same proposed street that's shown on Aquaba's development proposal. So the proposal to the south actually has the same right-of-way shown. It's just, and that they both correspond, or they both reflect what's required on our future growth plan for the area, future conceptual development plan. They both show that roadway connection, and they both have shown it on their plans as being a future development.
Is it literally the same street?
Yeah, except one showing it on their property, the other one showing it on their property. So at the end of the day, we'll
Okay.
we're gonna get a road one way or the other. I just don't. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. That's helpful. Councillor Graham.
Do you think that the next time this comes before us at step 3, we'll see more detailed plans rather than sketches and drawings? And maybe you could pass that feedback along, that it would be appreciated to, and I think it would have been nice had those been available for our mail-out survey as well, but it is what it is, and there's certainly no requirement, but it sure would be appreciated.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'll let the applicant know, and there will be some information like the breakdown of units that we'll need for certain things, like our parking requirement that, well, you know, we'll need additional information for sure as part of step 3.
Thank you.
Councillor McGrath.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can we go back to, I don't know what slide it is, I'm sorry, but it had sort of the green space, showed some of the connections that I had been asking about at the previous one. This one, yes. So this is sort of our future plan for this entire area, is that correct? Either of the planners can...
Yeah, I can speak to this. So yes, that is the future development plan for the south end of town. There's also one for the east end, but this is the one for the south end. And if you can see, Yonge Street is on the right-hand side. And if you follow Yonge Street about, looks like it's about, I don't know, almost about halfway up, a little bit more than halfway up. There's a yellow roadway connection shown there. Thank you, Jacob. Yeah, that actually is the, I didn't know you could do that. That's
Wow, that was
gonna have to learn how to do that.
your planner.
So there's that roadway connection is what is the one we're discussing here, and then you can also just see further to the south there's a dashed green line, which is the open space connection that's required that Aquaba had shown in their proposal. I'm hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Aquaba? Yes. Okay. All right.
Okay, so that's very, very useful, very good to know, so that considering where we are and what we're looking at. Can we go to the slide that showed the subject properties? It literally had subject properties written on it, just because there is existing structures, and I just had some questions. Yeah, that one. So those structures are gone, but we've got two outlines, but we're taking up the entire space. Why do we have just wondering why we have that border around the two structures that are no longer there? I think one of them might be there. Okay, so the shed is still there apparently.
Based on like what the PIDs would have been.
So but we are using both PIDs. Are we consolidating those PIDs at any point? Because looking at the final product, I don't see how anybody could sell that smaller piece and do anything with it. So it'll be consolidated. Perfect. Thank you. And those are gone. We don't have anyone here for me to ask about, car share or any of that fun stuff. We will have somebody to talk to before we make our recommendation to council, I assume. Perfect. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Thomas.
Yes, just looking at the site plan, the updated site plan and the previous site plan. The previous site plan shows that there's two entrances into the development. Essentially one, the entrance closest to Yonge Street seems to service the townhouses. And the one farthest from Yonge Street, the one that's the most easterly, seems to just service the multi-unit buildings. Is that correct? And is that how it is now? Because the updated site plan doesn't have any, it's only one entrance. And boy, I'd want a piece of cheese by the time I got home on this one. Yeah, so I'll just leave it at that. But what I'm looking for, I guess, is an updated site plan so that I know where the entrances are and et cetera. I think that'd be extremely helpful, right? And also the number of units, for parking and all that, number of bedroom units and all that. This proposal as presented tonight is lacking in a lot of detail that makes it difficult to ask any meaningful questions. So, thank you. We do have somebody, Chair, we do have somebody in the audience that would like to speak.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, thank you for your patience. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, we would appreciate
I'm
it.
Alec Pears on 598 Yonge Street, next to the 656 property that they're going to develop.
Sorry? Would you be, I think we're trying to locate where you are. If you can you see that slide up there?
Yes. I'm the one with the horses. Yeah. Well, I got a problem. I have a problem with it because I had horses for the last 50 years, and my father had them another 50 years, and I'm supposed to have a grandfather clause, and they're building that building right 30, 11 feet from my barn, and it's going to be smelled with the horses, and some old bugger up the 6th floor is going to start complaining to the town of Truro. And I've been there over 50-some years. So
that's your house sort of at the top and then your barn on the east side of your lands, is that right?
I would say.
Yeah, southeast corner. Yeah.
So what do you do about the smell when he complains about the smell of the horses? And I've been there over 50 years. My father was there 50-some years before me. So I thought it's what I was supposed to have a grandfather's clause. Do you think I should have one?
And you would have been part of the Hill neighborhood, if I'm
Yes.
right, right? Yeah. And you've seen a lot of development in your area, we know
Yes,
that.
I have. I mean, the development's good, but I mean, you gotta expect the people that have been there for years too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're not dealing with Trump here, which is good. Or I don't think we are.
Jacob, can we go back to the layout? Sometimes it's hard to, okay. So actually that setback that you were referring to would be right where this gentleman is
It's very close. So
speaking about.
there's just under 4.5 meters of setback to the property line. If I go back here, you can see that there's sort of like a buffer, like a tiny buffer in between the two properties, but it's really not that great. Just given the height of the buildings, regardless of what its neighbors are, I think it is sort of a low setback for your structure to have, given the height.
Any other comments from the committee about this? Deputy Mayor Thomas?
Well, I would suggest that the site plan needs to be altered, there needs to be a greater buffer between that barn and his property and that 6-story building. So, there's townhouses and 6-story buildings. The townhouses are lower in height, and perhaps they'd be better abutting his property than a 6-story multi-unit building. So I'd like to see, some sensitivity there in regards to the site plan and Mr. Paris's, property use. I think it's a fair concern. He has the right. My understanding, he has the right to have horses, and I don't think. I think the developer themselves should be aware of that there are horses, 13 feet away, a barn 13 feet away that potentially, and these odors rise. So I'm just going to suggest that it might be in their best interest to realign the site plan so there's not, so the risk of conflict between neighbors, it could be reduced,
And Mr. McPherson, just remind us, but I believe what you said is that the height of the buildings has increased because this developer does not wish to put underground parking any longer.
That's right. So you can see the original application here. So if we're actually looking at the north of the property, the one that is closest to the to
Neighbors.
Paris's site, the number of stories has remained the same. So it was 6 and it would be 6 now, which does reduce the number of units in the total development. But you've got 3 6-story buildings here. So the overall height of the site has increased from the step 1 to step 2.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Councillor McGrath?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Paris. If I may ask, and this may sound like a silly question, but how far away can you smell the horses? From how far away can someone smell the horses?
Well, I don't know. Depends on how good a smell you got.
Yeah, well,
Best I can tell you.
yeah, well, I mean, it might be, yourself who spends a lot of time with them may not even notice it as much anymore. Someone,
See,
I might go,
today, and you can't smell it on me, but my clothes. But I mean, somebody else, you might could smell it on my clothes. We don't smell it on the 6th floor.
yeah, well, then that's sort of where I'm getting at is that,
You don't smell it on the 6th floor.
yeah, if we're talking about what a proper setback is, how far is enough to, yeah. Yeah. That's certainly safe to, I certainly spent enough time up at 627 Yonge Street, and I had no idea that there were horses across the street. But 627 is a fair cry away from this, what, 4.5, less than 4.5. What was that, 4.2797, if my eyes don't deceive me. Mr. McPherson, you mentioned that there's a slight buffer between this property line and Mr. Paris's property line. Then we've got another little bit to the burn. I'm just trying to figure out how far away do we go, or do we advertise this as a feature of rural living, and that they can, maybe the developer wants to put in a community garden and use some of Mr. Paris's horses to provide some fertilizer for same. I don't know. But certainly we talk about, the wilderness area of that aspect of town, and, certainly the importance of rural living, which is what a lot of people are coming for. At some point, there has to be some balance of, if you're going to live rural, you're going to have to expect some wildlife, some horses, some smells. I don't know at what point we get there, though, but it's just, these are definitely things that need to be considered. If you've got 65 units in that building, which looks like it'd line up probably almost halfway along there, would be right by Mr. Paris's barn, if I've got my bearings correct here.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for that. Anything else from the committee, or should we leave this for the next meeting? Thank you, Mr. Paris. We really appreciate you coming. Thank you for waiting so long.
No problem.
And I think Mr. McPherson has some things to take back to the developer on that one. Okay, thank you. And certainly ask them to attend the meeting next time if they can. Okay, we just have two things left. We will start with 199 Willow Street, which I believe is Ms. Connolly's, and I believe Mr. Fox is assuming the role for this evening.
Yes. So this is for 199 Willow Street. This is a pretty straightforward one. I'm looking for a short process on this, or the standard process, so 4-step. And the reason I'm asking for that is just a minor change to the architecture of the building, which unfortunately isn't consistent with the terms of the development agreement. But the property in question is 199 Willow Street. It's approximately 5,382 square meters in area, around 1.3 acres. It doesn't have direct public access to the street, but it does have access to both Willow Street and Callback Street via a right-of-way easement. Driveway actually for the whole development is supposed to run along here, but as was discussed at today's council meeting, there's a number of driveways that were put in and actually do have access to the street, not a street, but the old DAR right away, which runs along between Callback and Willow. So the existing development agreement currently permits the buildings that are there, the 6-unit buildings, and then the one that's in being discussed here today is the property at the back, which you can just see here, which is the old medical center, which is a 2-story on one end, 1-story on the other, converted medical center, which has been converted into housing. And this is just a map showing the designation, the policy area designation, also that it's in the regional service zone, so both regional service. This is totally permitted by development agreement. So here's some old, this is the old architectural elevation drawings of the structure when it was converted under development agreement. So you can see it has a flat roof on these drawings, and it actually has a flat roof here as well, and that was included in the terms of the development agreement at the time. I think there was some concern about the height of the structure, if you can believe that at the time, so there was a real interest in keeping the building one to 2 floors. So we're at step 1 on this. We're looking again at the 4-step process and the reason I'll show you why is because all they're simply asking to do is add this pitched roof onto the existing structure. It looks like they're also proposing to do some changes to the siding as well, which would probably bring it consistent with the 6-unit buildings next door on the former DAR right-of-way side of the property. So there's no change to the use of the property. Number of units is still going to be 14 within this building, and then there's the additional 30. There's 32 on the site total with the other 3 buildings. And then the parking ratio. I mean, none of this is, I'm just here for your information, none of this is being discussed or changed as part of this. The only change, again, I want to stress, is the change to the roof. And that's what we're looking for. So I don't think I need to spend a lot more time on this, but next step essentially is we'd be going to the next meeting, and we would come back with a full report and evaluation of the application and a recommendation at that time.
Do you need a motion for us
Yes,
to
I need a
move
motion
to
for this
the
short process.
shortened process? Okay. Councillor McGrath, are you making that motion? Surely you can't be asking questions about the roof.
Question. To change, I question why it needs a development agreement just to change the roof. I thought that would be within as of right, but apparently not. Just as Mr. Fox noted, this was discussed at today's council meeting. As part of this development agreement, do we have any authority to force them to continue using the driveway that they were supposed to be using and shut down the driveways on that old DAR road? Because that sounds consistent with what council was discussing today.
We have that authority today with the current agreement, so we can certainly go after or send out a notice to the property owner, Mr. Meach, and let him know that he's in violation of the development agreement by having the driveway access onto the old DAR line. But that would not something that would be included in for deliberations as part of this. It's outside of the scope of this particular application, which is solely dealing with the change to the roof line.
Perfect. Thank you. I can go ahead and make the motion that. Sorry, what were we trying to make the motion?
We're proceeding by standard as opposed to expanded.
So I would move that we move with the shortened 4-step version as opposed to the standard 5-step version, or the expanded 5-step version, which seems to be the standard.
Do I have a seconder on that motion, Ms. Delorier? Okay, any questions, or would someone like to proceed with the question? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any contrary minded? No, motion carried. Okay, so we'll look forward to step 2 on that at the next meeting. Okay. So last on our agenda this evening is 5458 Walker Street, which Senior Planner Fox will also speak to.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is another return visitor. This is another development agreement amendment, one that I'm sure most councillors are familiar with from our time on the Dangerous and Unsightly Premises Committee. So what we have here is an application. This is 5458 Walker Street. It's a development agreement amendment application. This one's a little bit, unfortunately, a bit fluid at this time. And Peter Jabor, the applicant, is actually in Toronto. He did want to be here, but he sends his regrets. I did speak with him again today. He's anxious to move forward with this proposal, to purchase the approved development agreement for this site with some modifications. And the modifications, unfortunately, I believe, are going to require amendments to the agreement because he's looking for a reduction in the number of stories, but he's also, which isn't a problem, but he is looking for a reduction in the number of parking spaces as well, which is going to be outside of the parameters of the approved development agreement. So this application was made just last week on the 1st. The property is actually still owned by LMH Holdings, which was the applicant last time, but Mr. Jabor is the developer who is also responsible for the 150-unit development on Callback Street and also the development under construction at 85 Yonge Street, which is just by the tracks. So he's done quite a bit of development in town and is anxious to move ahead with another proposal. I think they like to have one sort of in the wings, waiting when they start to become close to completing one. They like to have another one ready to go. So I believe his intent is to move to this site next. And he was looking to actually break ground this year. I have no way of confirming that would actually happen, but that is his intention as he spoke to me today. So he was anxious to get this on the agenda, so I accommodated that, given the interest in seeing this property dealt with in terms of its dangerous and unsightly status. So it is a vacant parcel, or a vacant property, former, I think it's 6 units, one of which might be illegal. This is the property here. The building is in derelict state and it is in need of repair or redevelopment. So the subject properties outlined there, they have an area of about 1,585 square meters, and they have about 39 meters of frontage on Walker Street. The lands are situated in a mixed-use area in the downtown. There's this old photo of the subject property there, so it looks pretty bad here. It looks worse today because this was taken like 3 years ago, I believe, when the original application went through. Subject properties contain a 2.5-story converted dwelling that, as I mentioned, has been vacant for several years and needed substantial repairs. This was the proposal that was approved by council in 2022. I think the application may have gone through in 2021, but the development agreement was entered into in 2022, and it permits an 8-story multi-unit building with 55 dwelling units and 2 levels of underground parking. The 2 levels of underground parking, as I'm sure you are aware from hearing everything we've been hearing from developers, is expensive, and the idea and I think the developer is looking at that and the cost, the effectiveness or the performa, whatever they went through to do the business case for it, doesn't support the 2 levels of underground parking, so they're looking at a reduction in the number of units and also a reduction in the amount of parking. So this is just showing that the properties in the downtown core, zone, and also in the downtown core policy area. You can see it outlined in blue there, so it's well within the downtown area. Looking for a short process on this, and I'll explain this a little bit more in a second. So this is what's being proposed as a revised proposal. I do apologize for kind of the grainy image there, but you get a general idea of what's basically they're doing is reducing the height of the building by 3 floors down to 5 stories, keeping the exact same design for the most part. And then what they're looking to do is a multi-unit building with 46 dwelling units and 1 level of underground parking. So again, 5 floors. This is the same exact site plan that was approved in 2022. Same underground parking entrance off of Walker Street up here. This one shows grade related units, so units that actually have an address sort of on the street, an entrance off the street, as well as an interior entrance. There's outdoor amenity at the back and this little parcel at the back here. And this is an elevation drawing showing the basically same design of the first 3 floors and the setback upper floors. Only 2 floors though, not the 8 that was original. Well, sorry, only 2 floors, not the 5 that would have at one point been on top of the 3-story podium. This is the underground parking entrance here, and this is just the rear elevation. And then there's the parking layout, and you're seeing 21 vehicles, and I'm sure Deputy Mayor Thomas is cringing at the thought of just 21 spaces at this point, but I'll get to that in a second. So it used to have 2 levels of parking, and there was close to 40, it might have been over 40 spaces in the original, approved proposal. I believe something like that. I think I have a comparison chart here in a moment. This is just the ground floor layout. Similar to it's basically the same as the approved plan. I know the applicant is talking about doing a couple of 3-bedroom units instead of the current unit mix, because a lot of these are they're all just 1s or 2s in the current plan. Again, showing the common amenity space at the rear. And this is just the standard floor plan for levels 2 and 3, and again, similar to the 2022 proposal, and as I mentioned, it now includes some 3-bedroom units which aren't shown in this drawing, so the drawings haven't been updated yet. And then there's levels 4 and 5 plan as well, showing how it steps back a little bit. And there's like the lower podium is here. This is the 3-story section, and this would be the 5-story section here. So the comparison of the two, what we're looking at is we have 8 stories in the approved 2022 proposal. The current proposal is 5 stories. The number unit is 55 in the approved proposal, and we're down to 46 on the current proposal, or the proposal before you today. Lot coverage is the same. Parking spaces go from 40 down to 21. Parking ratio in the original or the approved one is 0.72 spaces per unit, and it goes down to 0.46 per unit. The developer and I had a conversation today, and we did talk about the number of parking spaces. He believes he can reconfigure the parking spaces to get upwards, I think he said 2 additional spaces, so to bringing it to 23 spaces, which would change this ratio slightly. And then he's also looking at the amenity spaces the same, keeping that the same. So just some supporting material. The approved development agreement included a traffic impact statement and a stormwater management plan. So that stuff's been done and submitted already, and it wouldn't be, you're looking at fewer units, so the traffic impact statement should be valid. And then there's no change to vehicle access. So again, traffic impact statement should be valid. Stormwater management plan would still be acceptable given there are no changes to the site plan, including the amount of impermeable surface. And a traffic impact statement, as I mentioned, would be fine as well. And then public participation, shortened process is recommended, so we'd be coming back to this committee at the end of the month with a full report and recommendation. Development application notice sign will be posted on the property in the coming weeks, and we'll post information on the town's website, and we'll do the mail out as well. And the reason I was pushing for this to be on today's agenda is because he was anxious to have approval in place for a fall construction start, which means that in order to get to a July public hearing, I would need to have a recommendation from this committee at the end of May, end of this month. So next step, standard short process is recommended again. And the reason we're recommending a short process is not just because the developer's in a big hurry, it's because we're looking at a reduced size development here as far as the building height. So, and there's not a lot of substantial changes other than the change to the number of parking spaces. So the idea is that we would proceed to a full report and recommendation to Planning Advisory Committee on May 26th, and then that would give us a public hearing date on July 7th. And just to, because nothing seems to be simple anymore, just to add to this discussion, I talked to him today, and I did indicate to him that I thought for sure parking was going to be an issue. The reduction in parking was going to be a problem, and that he suggested, I think this design is somewhat still, I think he's open to modifying this design further. So it is, as I mentioned, pretty fluid. I think what he's thinking is he would move to have a ground floor level parking as well as a one below grade. So the idea would be similar to what he's done at 85 Yonge Street, which is you drive in off of the street into a parking level, and then you also go down one level to one below grade parking level. And that's a more cost-effective way of doing parking, structured parking, rather than going 2 levels below ground. But that would increase the height of the building by 1 additional floor. But again, you had approved originally the council had approved originally 8 floors, so it's still within keeping of that original sort of building envelope that was approved. But I think all of that would result in some changes to the unit configuration and probably how the street gets treated. So what I've told him is that he can keep to this timeline, but he needs to get back to us with a refined, detailed design by, in time for the meeting later this month. So I'm not sure if that's going to be a feasible thing to do or not. It's also possible that if he's able to reduce the height of the building and keep the parking ratio to 0.75 spaces per unit, that may still fall within the terms of the original approved agreement. So we may not even have to address it. That's another thing that may happen, but I did want to start the process and at least have you aware that it may be something we can do internally with the terms of the approved agreement. And that's it.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor McGrath.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no problem with the shortened development process, and I can make that motion, but my only concern is that we don't actually know what they're doing yet. Do we even need the development agreement? As Mr. Fox pointed out, there's a lot fluid here, and it's difficult to make a decision on such fluidity.
Right. What I think,
Yeah, go ahead.
What I think might happen is if he was waiting to hear back on what the sort of response was from this committee tonight, and I'll get back to him, let him know that. I think he may come back to us with a revised proposal based on this design. If he wishes to proceed with, if you guys are somehow amenable to the idea of having just the 21 or 23 parking spaces, I think he would be prepared to proceed with the design as is, sort of. And if not, I think he would come back to this committee with a revised proposal. And I think at that time you could say, no, I'm sorry, we're not interested in proceeding with a short process because the changes are so substantive that we need to go through the full process after all.
Right. The only thing I would recommend changing in this is to ensure that there is more bicycle parking, because this is a downtown location. It's very walkable. The grocery store is pretty much almost across the street. Lots of things and amenities within walking distance, but also cycling would make it a lot easier to run some of those errands and carry goods back and forth, negating the need for the vehicles. But if you can find some additional space, I don't know. Can we go to the overhead of just the entire site plan? Is it possible for the developer, maybe they want to consider expanding under the outdoor amenity space for additional car or bicycle parking, or if that's...
Yeah, the unfortunate part about that little outdoor amenity space is it's actually less than 60 feet wide. And once you get down below 60 feet, it's not really cost effective to try and do 2 bays of parking with an aisle.
Yeah.
So you can no longer, not only is it not cost effective, it's not cost effective, it's not possible. So
Yeah.
you don't have the dimensions required to create a full aisle plus 2 parking stalls on either side. So because it is under the 60 feet, so it's kind of a useless space except for the outdoor amenity piece.
It could be used for storage, for bicycle parking, or even just one bay of parking on either side, because I'm sure Deputy Mayor would love to see some additional parking added in there somewhere. But yeah, if we can get the developer to either commit to this design with some bicycle parking added, given the downtown location, then I think we could move forward with, in my opinion anyway, see what the rest of the committee says. But I would have no problem with moving forward with the shortened time frame. And then also the last question would be, when would he plan to demolish the existing structure and make a lot of the nearby residents very happy that they no longer have to look at that? Thank you.
Just before I get to the next people, I just want to clarify something from a procedural perspective, Mr. Fox. So right now, we have a proposal on the table which has a poor parking ratio, and it's different from what was originally approved. But if we're comfortable with it, you're saying we could approve a short process. But if we are not comfortable with it, I'm not understanding why that would mean that we wouldn't then go to the expanded process, because to me, that would be more in line with what was already agreed to.
Sorry, if he comes back with something that you decide he's made so many alterations to the design that it
Okay,
can no
not
longer.
just parking.
Not just parking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
thanks.
think if he manages to somehow achieve additional parking without changing the design significantly, I think that's great. But I suspect that addition of the ground floor parking would cause, it's going to change some of the unit configurations that might be problematic to fit under. Anyway, I think, sorry, it's been a long day.
Okay. It's tough. I don't love ground floor parking, to be honest.
So there has to be a way to treat the street in such a way that there's still permeability and you still have that eyes on the street piece, sort of traditional kind of planning kind of look. But I think what he was looking for was sort of feedback from the committee on whether or not they would be open to the reduction in parking. If not, I think he's going to be looking at those changes. And hopefully we can, if he does decide to proceed with the change where there's ground floor parking plus a below grade parking, I think we're going to be trying to look at having that go through the terms of the existing agreement and not have to come back to this committee. That might be a possibility. But I wanted to get the ball rolling and start the process.
Okay, Councillor Graham?
I have no problem with the shortened application process, and I also have no trouble with the reduced parking. I would like to follow up on Councillor McGrath's comment regarding the demolition of the current building. Is there a mechanism within the development agreement process that we can build in a required timeline or something to that effect to make sure that, because we see that applications development agreements get sold and put up for sale all the time, and that was one of the reasons we've been stuck with this one for so long.
Yeah, I don't think you'll see Mr. Jabor sell the development. That's not what he does. They just build. But yes, we can certainly put a time limit on when the building has to come down within the terms of the agreement.
That would be great. Yeah. Thank you.
Is there not a timeline on the approved application that's currently?
There is. The timelines on that, I believe, they may have, I think they have expired. It's just that council hasn't discharged the agreement at this point. So the council has the ability to discharge the agreement at any time. The timelines for construction have passed. So it can be discharged. It's just that we don't typically do that until things change significantly in the area, and then we want to get rid of the old development agreements.
Deputy Mayor Thomas?
Yeah, I hate to be predictable, but so I like the fact that it has no. I'm not comfortable with the parking so reduced as to 20 spaces, but I would like to see the architect be creative. I don't want to see the front of this building, the front facade, and the bottom floor to be a parking level, that bottom floor, from the front. I think that you can have the back part of the building on the first floor being parking, not, and others pick up a few spaces. I want to protect the facade, the front facade, as a building at the streetscape. I think it would be a mistake to do anything about that. So I think we're asking him to be very creative. We can make some movement. I'd be comfortable with some movement down from the 0.72, but not much, So I'm looking forward to see how creative he can be, including, I don't oppose adding another story to it, in order to make up for that difference. So I'll leave it at that. But the parking is an issue.
Okay. Any other comments? I'm pretty much in Deputy Mayor Thomas's camp. I think some more parking would be helpful, but to me, I would be very opposed to the main floor being a parkade. I think that would be a very bad choice.
Sorry, just so I'm clear, if the facade remains some sort of residential, but the main floor could be parking, but as long as the facade of the building because I think if you look at 85 Yonge Street, for example, the architect did a pretty decent job of giving, it's hard to tell right now, but the ground floor actually has a small office space plus the main residential entrance and lobby facing the street. But there is no residential ground floor on 85 Yonge Street. It's all
But it's
parking.
still under construction. It's a little
It's hard to tell. I mean, I can remember what the renderings look like. There is a way to do it so that your facade has and I'm not talking about a faux facade, I'm talking about actually having occupied spaces on the ground at the street level, and then behind that space becomes,
Yeah, I think that would.
it's usually like residential amenities, like the gym, the residential lobby, the entrance to the parking garage would be there, that kind of thing, and the residential entrance.
So as you're walking by, Mr. Fox, as you're walking by the building, it appears, and I would like to even see it, house something for people, not cars, for the first few feet of the building.
Yep.
On the first floor.
Yeah. I don't think we want to set the precedent that the ground floor can just be,
No.
yeah. Okay, well, thank you, everyone, for sticking around. Can I have yeah, I do. I just want to make sure there's nothing else, no new business or no anything. Our next meeting, I think we know, is May 26th. Okay, so other than that, if I could have a motion to adjourn, that would be wonderful.
So moved.
Okay, thank you very much. Everyone is free to go.